Hello listeners, and welcome to this week's episode of The Cult Vault. I'm your speaker Casey, and I'm excited to bring to you all another interview and a new memoir. Today we dive back into David Berg's Children of God, with author Mary Mahoney taking us through her life, her experiences, and her book, Abnormal Normal, My Life in the Children of God, which is available to buy right now. Before we start, a huge thank you to Sharon for your donation to the show this week, and another huge thank you and welcome to my newest patron, Max, who is my first top-tier sponsor of the show. Together with the consistent support of others, the podcast can continue for another month. I thank you 1,000 times over. The Ally Awards are still open for people to nominate those who have positively impacted their lives. You can submit your entry on my website, cultvaultpodcast.com, where you can also find my shop, now live with hoodies, t-shirts, mugs, badges, stickers and bookmarks. For this February weekend, there is a 20% off code when you use FEB at the checkout. Also, I have been invited to appear at the biggest true crime event in the UK. On June 11th and 12th, I will be at CrimeCon UK in London representing the Cult Vault podcast amongst other huge podcasts, detectives, sniffer dogs, CSI professionals who will be offering forensic workshops and true crime authors and private investigators. If you are UK based and interested in true crime, you cannot miss this event. It's now partnered with expert-led true crime TV channel CBS Reality. Visit crimecon.co.uk and use the code CULT at the checkout to receive a discount on your tickets. I can't wait to see you there. Also, today's interview with Mary is going to be about her book, which is this month's monthly memoir giveaway book. If you'd like to be in with a chance of winning a copy of Mary's book at the end of this month, then you can comment, like and follow me across social media in the month of February to be automatically entered into the draw. You can find me on Twitter, Instagram and Facebook at CultVaultPod. Now let's get to the episode. This episode does come with a trigger warning. There are themes of human trafficking, sexual abuse, child labour and more, so please listen with discretion. Here is Mary Mahoney, author of Abnormal Normal, My Life in the Children of God. So hello listeners, a quick disclaimer before we get started. Due to time zone differences, I am actually recording this episode early on in the day, whereas usually I would record in the early afternoon or the evening, which means that my two kids are in the house with my partner downstairs, and it's very foggy, wet and miserable outside. So my partner is waiting for the fog to lift to take them out, but we may hear them over the microphone before that happens, which I do apologise for, but maybe some of you will enjoy hearing the hustle and bustle of everyday life that goes on around us. And I just wanted to let you know about that before we get started. But let's get on to the episode. So hello, Mary, and thank you so much for joining me today. I am looking forward to finally getting to chat and learning more about your experiences and writing processes. And I've had the privilege of being able to read your memoir prior to our chat today, and I'm looking forward to discussing this at length. Would you like to start by introducing yourself to the listeners?
Okay, I grew up in Washington, D.C. I was the youngest child of a large family, and my childhood was spent swimming and going to Catholic school pretty much. My mother was almost puritanical. Our house was immaculately clean. We had to rake the rug if we walked on it because we might have left a footprint on the deep the deep carpet. That would have been bad. We weren't allowed to sit on the sofa unless we put a sheet down first to keep it clean. So my mother was very clean. And I was expected to help with housework, and that was fine. That was normal. And there were certain things in my house I should never talk about. And one of those things was sex or nudity or anything like that. So that was my childhood, kind of a little bit puritanical and restricted. Probably she was raised in her mother was Victorian, right? My mother was born in 1921. So her mother was born in like the 1880s or 90s, like Victorian era. So I guess that was her upbringing. So she was just repeating how she had been raised.
And did you ever find yourself taking any of those same teachings on board with your own cleanliness? I mean, there probably wasn't a choice in your bedroom at home in your childhood home, but kind of, do you feel like any of that stuck with you?
Well, I like things clean, but when you have 8 kids, something's got to give.
Your story is one that we've heard about on the show before, but it's different in the way that a lot of the people that come forward and speak out about this particular topic are born into it, or second, third generation members. But that's not your story entirely. So would you like to go into the movement that you came across, the name of the movement, and all of that stuff?
Okay, well, go back to my childhood in the 1960s. The world was a different place. There was a Cold War, the space race, a lot of anger among the youth against the draft, where young people were being sent to the hellhole of the unpopular war in Vietnam, and nobody wanted to go. And there was a lot of protest music. Our house shook with Bob Dylan and other protest singers, And my older siblings would march in the protest marches in downtown DC. And one of my brothers got maced and corralled during the May Day demonstrations. And all this was all going on. And then my parents, as I said, were Catholics. And so they paid for my brothers to go to these Catholic colleges. Then they all dropped out and joined communes, where they were, as my brother said, working by day and partying by night. And drug use was really, really common. And even in my strict Catholic school, there was drugs. And so during my teenage years, being the youngest, by the time I was 12, 13, 14, like in high school, my older brothers had all moved away, and our house was quiet again. I just heard like the TV from the den when my parents were watching the news or something. And so I had my emotional ups and downs. But by my 16th birthday, I decided that, I don't know, I was kind of depressed, and I figured, well, I know what's going to solve my problems in life with my 16-year-old wisdom. I'll just get really thin, and that'll do it. Because the ideal of beauty was this waif of a woman named Twiggy. You can imagine. Oh, you can Google her. She was quite thin. And so that was what beautiful was. So I figured, if I were just beautiful and thin like her, then all my problems would be solved. Now, I was a competitive swimmer. I weighed maybe 62 kilos, and I was not fat. But in my mind, I was fat. So that was going to solve all my problems. Well, as you could guess, it didn't. So anyway, I faced going back to Catholic school after the summer ended. And in the meanwhile, I had looked into transcendental meditation, which my brothers had done. My father was like, oh, that's just Hinduism. So okay, can't go there. I looked into some church basement Jesus people meetings that they played guitar and sang. And that was like fine, but no, thank you. And then my first week of school, my junior year, I walked into the auditorium for a study hall, and there sat this girl that I had smoked dope with before. And she was reading a Bible, and it's like, what? No one reads a Bible in Catholic school. What's that about? And so I said, what are you doing? She's like, oh, here, read this. I met this guy, it's really cool. And I'm like, okay. So she passed me this pamphlet called Faith, and it talked about how faith in God was like a baby nursing from a mother. And I'm like, what? A baby nursing from a mother? This was like shock to my conservative upbringing. I couldn't even imagine. It was like too much for me. And so I was like, okay, this is super weird, but it's kind of interesting. Like, what is this girl so interested in? Okay, I decided, okay, I'll go with you and see what this is about. So I went with her after school to meet this guy who had been kicked out of the Children of God, this Christian group. And I don't even know what he did to ever get kicked out. But anyway, he was still like really into preaching the Children of God message. So he had told her about Jesus. Then he told me about Jesus and how I had to pray to receive Jesus into my heart, and then I could go to heaven. And basically, it was like a Protestant Reformation message. Faith in Christ is all you need to go to heaven. So, okay, that's kind of interesting. And so I went home and I did my best to pray to receive Jesus into my heart. I pulled out an old Jesus People newspaper I'd gotten from one of those church basement meetings. And I was like, oh, there's this prayer and okay, I'll do that. And then like nothing happened. I'm like, nothing happened? What? Okay. Well, so then I went to see him the next day and I said, hey, nothing happened. And he's like, what did you expect, lightning? Yes. And he said, it's all by faith. And he showed me all these Bible verses. And so anyway, I kind of started studying with him and with this girl. And she and I became really good friends. And eventually we went to the Children of God commune downtown DC. And walking in the door to that place, it was just filled with young people. All the women with these long hair and long dresses. Like, I don't know if you've seen videos of the 60s and the 70s, but this is hippies, So these long-haired girls and these guys, all the guys had short hair though, but they came all, everybody gave us a hug. Everybody was so kind to us. And then we all joined in the living room for this rousing singing time. And we were just on cloud 9, lifted up in like some high realm of ecstasy from all this love and this, all this singing. And we were like, yes, this is it. This is it. And we had fallen in love. It was the brain chemicals were just the same as falling in love. And we had fallen in love with this group and this ideology. And I was like, yes, we're home now. I'm going to give my life to this great cause, the children of God. I'm willing, this is what my calling is in life. I'm going to be a missionary. I'm going to help others. I'm going to do my best, to help change the world for better.
Wow. And that's how it happened. That massive dose of love bombing with your first experience down at the commune is kind of what sealed the deal.
Yes, pretty much.
And it's so interesting to hear you speak through and in your memoir Abnormal Normal, which is published and available, and we'll talk and reference the book as we go. But it's interesting now that I've read the book and you detail these experiences, but for you to kind of summarize it is also an interesting perspective, because you can almost see from your struggles with your eating and your weight through to kind of practicing parts of Hinduism, going to basement groups and searching for something, looking for something kind of in different spaces, and then finding this community and having this feel of being part of something bigger than yourself. And when you finally find that, you're like, this is it, I found it, and so I don't need to look any further, so I can just stay here.
Yes. Yeah, they were living like the book of, like the early disciples did in the book of Acts, So to me, it struck me as like a mix of old time religion and hippiedom. Perfect match, this is just what I needed.
How did you know that the commune existed in that part of town? Were you told about by the person who had been kicked out of the group, and he informed you that...
He was in touch with them, and he was the guy that brought us down there. We went together with him. He was still our main leader, the person we went to for Bible studies and everything, and he was our main teacher.
And were you invited to come back and join the community one day a week for prayer sessions or helping on the land? How did it work in terms of your funneling into joining the Children of God full time?
Well, ironically, we went there whenever we could. It was kind of but ironically, somehow some message was sent down from the leadership that the guy that had been kicked out wasn't supposed to be visiting. But it got a kind of a snafu, and they said that we weren't allowed to be visiting. So they were like, okay, you guys, you're teenagers, so you can't join full time, but what God has for you is for you to reach the young people at the high schools in Virginia and Maryland. You guys just need to reach the other young people, because we can't do that, but that's what God's calling you to do. So that was our job, to reach the other young people. And then we, for some reason, they told us that we weren't allowed to visit, but that was a mix-up. So then Blair and I became like a team, and then we started reaching kids in other schools and in our own school. And we ended up with about 12 other young people that were all like, we called them catacombs disciples, after the early church, when the people lived in the catacombs of Rome hiding out. That was what we were. We were like still in the world, not in the group. And we were in the catacombs. So we were their catacomb disciples, they called us, which made us so special.
And how were you reaching these other people? Was it verbally? Did you have any propaganda that you would take around with you?
Well, did we? Well, the children of God's main, okay, let's go back a step. According to the Bible, a Christian should proselytize. There should go ye into all the world and preach the gospel to every creature. So that's the basic tenet of Bible Christianity. So as children of God members, that was one of our, probably the biggest rule, is that you had to tell others, you had to proselytize. And I think in the early years, before I was around, in the Children of God, people did it face to face, just talking to people. But by the time I came around in 1973, there were these publications that we called Mo letters, because they were letters from our prophet, who was called Moses. And so Mo for Moses, letters. He would write us letters, and we would distribute these. All Children of God members distributed these. So you'd say, hi, here, can you help us out with a donation? Here, and they give them a pamphlet, and somebody, of course, they're going to give you a donation. You give somebody something, they're going to give you a donation. Maybe you just get 10 cents. That's fine. I'm not going to complain. They're nice enough to give me something. But you do that for 8 hours a day, and you come home with hundreds of dollars. So it was pretty lucrative. But anyway, but as a teenager in high school, I only did that when I went out on the weekends with the Children of God members. But for us in high school, we gave them out outside the door of our high school. We passed out these pamphlets, these Mo letters, at other high schools around our area. We'd sneak out of school early and then drive over to another high school so we could get them kids as they were leaving. And to be honest, most people just shrugged them off and like, God, you guys are crazy. And we were like, that's okay, because we're doing our job, and it's up to God whether they're and them whether they want to listen to us or not. But we're doing our part. And there's a Bible verse that says, if you don't warn people of their wicked ways, when they die, their blood will be required at your hands. That means like your hands will be bloody with their blood. It's your fault that person has gone to hell if you didn't tell them about Jesus. And if you didn't give them that Mo letter, it's your fault that they went to hell. So as long as we gave them that Mo letter, it wasn't our fault if they went to hell anymore. So we were under that sort of mental pressure that we had to pass these things out, or else like we were going to suffer shame for eternity. So already this pressure was on us.
And you felt like there was a real need for you to save other people in order to save yourself, almost like a real feeling that was something that would happen to you if you weren't able to reach people with these letters.
Oh yeah, we were going to suffer shame for eternity. What could be worse? Going to meet your maker, and you try to do your best for him, but you failed, and now you have to suffer shame for eternity. I mean, you could have gone to hell, but you didn't, because you believed in Jesus, but you just suffer shame instead. It's pretty bad.
You mentioned the leader of the Children of God briefly before, and I realized that we've skipped over an important part for anybody that may not have come across the Children of God or may not understand the origins of the group. So I wondered if we could quickly go back and have sort of a very short summary of how the Children of God was founded and what the core principles and practices were of the Children of God at the time you joined, because I know there were a few transition periods throughout history where the group have changed their MO almost.
Okay. Well, the group started in the late 60s, I think 1969, in Huntington Beach, California, where this man named David Berg, who had been a pastor, but I think he got kicked out of his church. He was living with his mother in Huntington Beach, and she had like a coffee shop where she made sandwiches and like preached to hippies and stuff. And he was like, thought, whoa, this is a good thing she's got going here. And he started preaching to the hippies, and he came off as kind of like a beatnik, radical, anti-system type person, which was just what young people wanted to hear. And then he started getting a bit of a following there, and it gradually grew and spread throughout the US. And that's where it started. And that was in 69. So by the time I met the group in 1973, they had like a booklet of rules. They were called the Revolutionary Rules. And one of the rules was that there was absolutely no sex before marriage, and you had to share everything you had. You couldn't, and anything that you brought to the group, you just gave it up. And you had to trust God to supply your needs. You weren't allowed to work have a job regularly, and you had to spend your days telling people about Jesus. So that was about the size of it when I joined. Or I didn't really join when I met the group in 73.
And you referred to the leader, Moses, before. I'm guessing Moses isn't a real name?
No, his name is David Berg, but some newspaper article, it is said, called him Moses, and his name stuck. So then he was Moses David.
That's interesting to draw the similarities between that person and Rock Terrio of the Anthill Kids, who also called himself Moses. I'm not sure if you know much about the Anthill Kids, but that group particularly, under Rock Terrio's leadership, probably experienced some of the most brutal of physical abuses underneath his leadership. So it's interesting to draw similarities between this group and that one just through the names that leaders choose to apply to themselves. Even though, Berg may say that he never adopted the name, it was just what other people gave to him. We'll never know the answer to that question, and that is one of the difficulties when we talk about these subjects is is accountability and deniability amongst people in positions of power. But you have gone to the commune, you've had this overwhelming experience of community and love and acceptance and feeling of a higher calling. You've gone away, you've almost become part of forming your own branch of the Children of God, sort of like like an initiation group almost, awaiting your formal move into the fold. So how does that transition work then, with you having this group of about 12 people, the catacombs group, and then moving into the group officially?
Well, as the people became adults, 18 years old, they went off and joined the cult. Well, let's see. Not everyone did, but the few of the main people did. And then finally I turned 18. And on that day, I moved into the cult home. But as I hadn't finished my high school yet, I think because the commune was so near to my parents' house, and my parents were fairly influential, and the cult leader said, you should finish high school, don't drop out, because that would just be too much for your parents. And so I did. So I walked to my high school from the cult home every morning and finished high school. And then at my graduation, I don't know, somehow I managed to graduate in the top 10% of my class, even though for the last 2 years of high school, I did like literally no study at all. So I don't know what was that with that. But so then one of my father's friends said, why don't you just go to a nice Jesus college? And I'm like, oh. I want to be a radical revolutionary in the children of God, Oh, my poor parents. And so, yeah, after I graduated from high school, I was moved up to uh, New England, and I stayed there for a while. And then I was called back down to DC to be the secretary of this leader, who was called an archbishop. We had kind of a hierarchy, kind of patterned after the Catholic Church. We had, Berg, Moses, and then we had bishops and archbishops and shepherds who were in charge of communes. Oh, district shepherds and shepherds. So it was like a hierarchy. So I went to work for this guy, and I was like, whoa, he's really corrupt. But instead of thinking the organization was flawed, I just thought, well, this guy's not following the teachings properly. It's him. It's kind of like the true Scotsman fallacy, that story. He couldn't be a true Children of God member, because no true Children of God member would do that. This is what I told myself,
When you were introduced to the group, and they already had these revolutionary rules laid out, which included things like, when you join, you give up all of your personal items, and they're distributed amongst, the household or wherever you were. Did you experience these rules as you integrated into the Children of God?
Oh, absolutely. I had worked as a lifeguard, and so I had saved all my money. So I gave them my bank book when I moved in. I brought my paintings. I had paintings, artwork on my walls. I had tapestries. I had like all my hippie clothes, and I just gave it all away. And I just kept a bare minimum for myself. In fact, this was like my modus operandi until even after leaving the cult. I still did it. I always gave anything nice I got away. If somebody gave me something nice, I'd think of somebody who might appreciate it and gave it to them. I don't know if what this means. I've never talked to a therapist, but I think it says something about my personality that like maybe I didn't feel I was worthy, but I'd always give everything away.
And at this point, the Children of God is operating all over the world.
Well, actually, I really don't know. I think it was pretty active in Europe. They had moved into Asia. I heard there were people in Japan, Vietnam, Australia. But as far as I don't know exactly where all they were.
And you're asked at some point to go and join the work outside of the US.
Yes. Okay. So the guy that was the corrupt archbishop, he got fired. Yay. And then I went and worked with this guy that was a bishop. And so I was like one of his servants. These leaders had their servants, they had their childcare people and their maids and their cooks. And so I was like taking care of kids and cooking and cleaning and being basically a servant and going out, distributing literature and getting money. And this fellow was somehow, for some reason that I don't know, was going to be sent to Manila. So as one of his slaves, me and the other people in our household were sent on ahead to find a house for him and get it all set up and everything. So when I was 19, myself and a few others in our commune flew across the world to Manila, stopping for refueling in, I think, Hawaii and Guam, both along the way. It was those days you couldn't fly straight through.
And what was that conversation like with your parents, where you decide, you tell them, I'm going to spread my message further afield. I'm leaving the country. I'm going to go traveling on my mission to spread the word of the Children of God.
Well, to be honest, I hardly remember talking. I mean, I know I talked to them about it. I mean, I called them on the phone because I wasn't in DC at the time. I was in Pennsylvania. But I think my gosh, I just don't even remember talking to them about it. But I do know that my mother called my sister in California, because we were stopping in California on the way. And she asked my sister, like, my sister was 8 years older than me, what should I do about Mary? And she's like, well, she's made up her mind. Just, let her go away. Thanks, sister. But because my mother was wondering about getting me deprogrammed, but my sister was like, oh, just let her go. Just let her go. So she just let me go. But I have to say, she did call just like her cousin that was a Catholic nun in Manila, and a friend of hers who was a doctor in Manila. And they both reached out to me when I first went there. And I think I made a good show of a normal, happy looking person. So they both, I think, wrote to my mom and said, oh, she's okay. Because I looked okay on the outside.
Often I feel like that's such a difficult part of these situations. There's an interview I had recently with an episode that will be out by the time this episode airs, where I discussed with a father his daughter moving away and joining a group, and he tried everything. He tried deprogramming, and she felt betrayed by him, and she broke off contact with him completely, and it was very, very difficult for him. And it took years for him to reestablish contact with his daughter. And in the end, he decided that he would just support her completely in the hopes that one day, when she decides on her own that it's time to leave, she'll come straight to him and know that he'll be waiting for her. And he feels like maybe that's what he should have done from the start. Sorry, it gets me a bit emotional thinking about it, because it was quite a touching story. But it's hard for your sister, because she's kind of taken that stance of just let Mary go. She'll, just let her go, let her do her thing. But your mum's kind of like, is that the right thing to do? Shouldn't I step in here and try and what there? I don't know if there is a right answer in that situation.
Yeah, it's pretty hard. Like my sister said to me, why didn't you just get into drugs? That I could understand, but this religious thing, But I don't know. In retrospect, I think that what I needed is just someone to really stick with me and be a friend. Because once I got on the other side of the world, my parents, they wrote to me and I wrote back to them. When I see my letters, it's like, gosh, I was a crazy person. Like way, way too many exclamation marks in my letters. And they're like, this false happiness was like just exuding my writing. I just couldn't bear it to look at it. But I just can't imagine what they must have thought. But they were like, what do we do? But then my mom died. And then shortly thereafter, my father died. So I was on my own. Well, yeah, it was pretty hard. So when I first went to Manila, I was in touch with my family. I went to a market. I bought everybody presents, sent them presents. I wrote to them. And then my mom got sick. She had cancer. And then I was living with this leader who had finally come over. And leaders and the children of God in general are kind of overly obsessed with security and paranoia, always thinking that some nebulous enemy was going to find them and take them away, or who knows what. And I think that was a definite characteristic of the group all through the time I was in it, was this paranoia, constant paranoia. And so during this week, we never got mail at our houses because that the enemies might find us there. It's almost like they were schizophrenic or something, delusional. But so this week, nobody went to check our post office box. And then after a week, somebody went there, and in the post office box was a telegram from the US Embassy to me. And so I brought it home, opened up this telegram, and it was a note from my dad that said, call home now. So I called my father. Oh, no, I couldn't call from the house because, of course, that would be bad security. Some nebulous enemy might find out. So somebody drove me, I think, to a restaurant nearby. I asked the restaurant owner, if I could use his phone to make a collect call to the US, and he was nice enough to say yes. And I called. My dad accepted the charges, and I said, how's mom? He said, we're on our way to the funeral now. And I was devastated. was like, oh my God, what could I say to my father? I didn't even know how bad off my mother was. I didn't even know she died. I didn't go home to her funeral, all because of my dedication to this cause that I'd given my life to, that I thought was so important. I missed this hugely important thing. And more than my mother's death, I think my shame and sorrow was eclipsed by the disappointment I heard in my father's voice towards me. And then I went home back to the commune, and I just had to continue my work for the rest of the day. I couldn't say, oh my God, my mom just died. I just had to bear it as a good soldier, because we were soldiers of the Lord. And then that night, after I put the children to sleep, they weren't my children, the children I was taking care of, I went outside and I just cried. But then I couldn't dwell on my grief. I just had to cry and then just suck it up and then just go back to my work the next day, because as a good Christian in the children of God, you had to be a strong soldier and endure hard times and not complain. So that was my mother's death. And then my father remarried a middle-aged woman with 5, 6 kids. And then he died. And I met my stepmother at my father's funeral. And so I didn't, of course, have a relationship with her. But then she inherited everything from my father. And then when she died, she gave everything to her biological children. So that was that in my family. And my older brothers and my sister died from alcoholism. My oldest brother also died from alcoholism. And then I have 4 other brothers that are still alive. But we were, during the pre-internet, before 2005, we weren't in very close touch. Maybe 2000 we got in touch around then. But for years, my letters would come back addressee unknown. So there I was alone in Manila in this group. And they were my family. They had to be my family because I didn't have any other family. I had nowhere to turn to. But okay, I started this train of thought off saying, in retrospect, what could have helped somebody like me is a friend that kept in touch with me and showed concern. But I turned my back on my friends, and I wasn't really keeping in touch with my friends because I, had my obsession with this new group. But if somebody had been able to reach out, keep in touch with me, it might have helped. I don't know. Stephen Hassan, he was able to leave the Moonies because of his sister. She worked it out for him, to go see his parents, and that eventually pulled him out. You have to get a cult person away from the cult a bit and give them some other inputs so that their brain can get a break from their constant indoctrination. Sorry, a bit of a tangent there.
No, and I feel like that's such an important part of the story, and it was heartbreaking to read that part of the book, and it was a shock as well. And I guess that you maybe wrote it in that way for it to be kind of as much as a shock for the reader as it would have been for you to make that phone call to your father and for him to tell you, I'm on the way to the funeral. It kind of oh, you've got this telegram, you go to the restaurant, you make the call, and then kind of it doesn't allude in the book to any tragic event that's about to just happen, and it just happens in the book it must have just happened for you when you made that call. And so many things that you've just said there are really important, because first of all, a bit further back, you said that you filled your letters with this false happiness or over compensating for happiness. And when you met with your mum's distant cousin, you were able to make her and your mother feel like you were happy on the outside. And I feel like that's really important to highlight, because often that must happen when loved ones speak to family members and friends that are in these high demand groups. They have these interactions where the person they speak with appears to be fulfilled or happy or safe, and they might truly feel like they are, without realizing the potential danger that they're in or the potential exploitation that may be happening to them, or maybe for other reasons, like you just said, the slow indoctrination, constant indoctrination, they're not able to speak out. You've clearly stated here that you weren't able to have personal emotions. In the book, if you ever mention things like that, you're seen as kind of selfish. You're not thinking about your work for the Lord enough. You're not committed to the cause enough. How dare you have personal thoughts and feelings about your own problems? You shouldn't be worrying about those. And the fact that you had to go and have that moment in private and not find any consolation from the people that you were living with at that time around a huge loss, a huge personal loss to yourself, shows that you were slowly trained to not have emotions, to not feel anything about anything. So when true tragedy does strike, or when you are exploited, or something horrible does happen, you're almost trained to still have that over happy communication with people who may think, oh, something's not right here, but you don't give them the chance to have that thought, because you're like, I don't know, I have these moments where I struggle to form what I'm trying to say, but it's kind of like the start of you training yourself out of not feeling anything, because you weren't allowed to.
Yeah, it was like have you seen the movie Pollyanna? Play the glad game. Oh, so it's kind of it gave me nightmares when I was a child. Anyway, it's in the Pollyanna, she plays the glad game. And so like you always have to be thankful for everything. So if something bad happens, you just have to look for the good and always, find the good. And so we weren't allowed to like voice anything negative at all. We always had to find the good. And like when hard things happened in your life, well, look, hello, the early Christians were burned at the stake. That's not happening to you, is it? What are you complaining about? So like, oh yes, I am a worm and no man, like it says in the Bible. I'm just dust. Oh, I have no right to complain for anything. It was like Berg even said that I can't remember it exactly, but it was such a killer quote. Any aspect of self is completely displeasing to the Lord, something like that, where you can't have any bit of yourself, because if there's any of yourself, oh, it's just awful for God. You just have to be utterly nothing and let God shine through you. So you can't have any self. Yeah, it's just was so wrong. It made it like infantilized all the adults in the group, because they had to be like children. That's what one of the things we were told when we joined. You've got to be a baby to go to heaven. You've got to be born again and be a child. But the problem was that these adults and the children of God just did not grow up and become responsible, normal adults. They remained children because they were so heavily controlled. You can't become an adult unless you learn to make decisions and live with the consequences and grow and make mistakes and grow. But no, you couldn't do that in the cult. You just had to obey.
And there are parts in your writing that are so perfect in summarizing, those things that you've just said. What I really found fascinating about your writing was that it's lightly peppered occasionally with psychological and like social science explanations for things that were happening with your brain at the time certain events happened during your time in the Children of God, things that you didn't understand at the time because your brain was still in certain stages of development. And you explain an event, and then you go on to say, of course, I didn't understand that at the time. My brain was in this stage of development and needed to go through X, Y, Z, but didn't get the chance to. So it's all of these things that, and when you went to the first house and you said it was full of young people, all of these young people whose brains are in a certain stage of development aren't able to have certain things happen because they're all going through this same experience that you are. And I've just found that so interesting to understand certain things happening at certain points, certain methodologies put in place with certain ages of people that have an effect in the way that you explain it. And it kind of took me back to some of the training that I did when I was working with young people, and we talked about why children push boundaries and why children test their parents and why children go out and take risks. And that's an actual developmental part of the brain. Children are supposed to, at a certain age, go out and drink alcohol. Well, maybe not, they're not supposed to go and drink alcohol, but they're supposed to go out, take risks, learn their own boundaries, what they can and can't do. And it's all part of this kind of fly in the nest preparation. Children take these risks and learn more about themselves by doing so. They push against their primary caregivers, and it's been proven to be an actual stage of development. And
yes,
it's almost like you're shutting down that part of your brain because you're becoming more obedient and not, you're not allowed to express your individualism. You're not allowed to go out and find your personal identity and things that you enjoy, like swimming, for example, was a huge part of your life when you were growing up. And so that was a really interesting part of the book for me, was to see the research and the learning that you had done post Children of God involvement and applying it back to those things that you remembered from your experiences.
Yeah, the reason I did that was because after I left, well, first of all, when I first left, I was just so horrified to look online and read the stories of these second generation people, these young people that had been born in the group, and the abuse that they suffered. I was like, oh my God, because I mean, seriously, some places were way worse than others. And I might have met a few terrible people, but mainly most of the people I met were people like myself that were just sincerely trying to do their best for God in this terrible organization. But and then most of the young people I knew were just like trying to do their best to make the best of this situation they were in. People were just trying to have fun. I was trying to have fun with the kids that were in my care and do my best to teach them, which was not easy because, when you always need money, the leaders always want those kids to go out on the streets and raise money. And I'm like, no, they need to study. And it was always like, this kind of thing. But I think that was pretty standard. But anyway, so after I left and I read these stories of these young people, I was like, oh my God, is that what was going on in this group? And where was I? How come I didn't know about this? And was it happening? And I just didn't see it. And oh my God. So I just felt so horrible. And I was just like, this darkness of guilt just fell upon me. And I was like, oh, I raised my kids in this group and I've done nothing to prepare for their college and our savings for retirement. We have no money. We've given everything to the cult. Oh, and now we're in our late 40s. And what are we going to do with these 8 kids? And here we are in this country where we don't even speak the language. And oh God. And it was like, I just felt so awful and so guilty. And basically, I was pretty much paralyzed by guilt. I just couldn't do anything. I was like, didn't know how to even put one foot in front of the other. But I had kids to take care of, so I had to. And I had to earn money to pay for the groceries and rent and school and everything. So I just had to keep going. But then now it's like, who was that person? How did I join this group? How did I stay in it? Why did I do that? Why did I make these decisions in my life? I was like, I have to know. But I mean, I lived in Japan. It's like, nobody speaks English. Who am I going to talk to about this? And even if there was an English speaking psychologist, who's going to understand somebody from my weird background of this sex cult I was in? It's like, it's very weird background. And so I was like, okay, I guess it's just up to me. I just have to study and pull myself out of this. And I have to find out why I joined and why I stayed. Those were my two main questions I had to answer. I had to understand it. So I started studying, and that's where I found answers, was in, first of all, a study on critical thinking, and then the class on critical thinking, every single bibliography notation. I read each of those books, and well, of course I had kids to take care of. So I was listening to a lot of audiobooks when I drive or when I cook or whatever. And I'd also read books when I had time. And I made the one that helped me the most was Daniel Kahneman's Thinking Fast and Slow, because he went through all the cognitive biases that people have, and how the availability heuristic, how when something is repeated and repeated and repeated and it comes readily to mind, then you believe it. It doesn't have to be true. If it readily comes to mind, you believe it. That's just the way humans are. So I'm like, okay, when I first joined the Children of God, I spent every waking hour memorizing Bible verses. They readily came to mind, believe you me. They still pretty readily come to mind. I surprise my younger kids with my Bible knowledge sometimes. But so it's like, okay, so that makes sense. Oh, and then the confirmation bias comes in. Oh, so all those things that readily came to mind that fed my faith, literally fed my faith. Faith comes by hearing the word of God, we were taught. Well, it's true. Science has proven. So the more you read, the more you believe it. And then the more you believe it, the less other influences, the less other information can influence you, because it just flows right off like water off a duck's back. You've got it, you believe it, you read it, so you believe it more, and then your beliefs confirm everything else you read. So it's like a cycle. So to get occultists out, they've just got to get out of that cycle. They've got to stop reading the publications or whatever it is that they keep familiarizing their brain with. And then I read about how you can rewire your brain. So this was in, I really liked the book, The Invisible Gorilla, How Our Intuitions Deceive Us. That's a great one. And the one by Norman Doidge about brain plasticity. The name of the book escapes me now, but The Brain That Changes Itself. That's the name of the book. He talked about how you can change your brain pathways, your brain, how he explains all, neurology and brain mapping and everything. But he says, so my takeaway was, I've been walking down these same mental pathways, these same intuitions, my same reactions that happen in situations. I've these paved roads in my brain. So I need to stop this, and I need to change it to another way. So I need to let those old ones get grown over by, jungle, and bash and, take my machete out and open up some new pathways in my brain. So I had to focus on changing my reaction. So if something happened, I knew my initial reaction was to, of course, with me, it would be submit and appease, because I had to be a good Bible woman and always give in. So I'd have to stop. Is that what you need to be doing right now? Think about it. Okay. So this is the new path we're going to make. We're going to do this. Or it was really a study and quite revelatory. And so I just had to work on that. So I spent a number of years, maybe 10 years. And then I was driving my friends crazy, my online friends, no one was around me. But I was telling them about all these things I was learning. And they're like, why don't you just start a blog? And I'm like, okay. So I started this blog. Then I'm like, well, why don't I just write a memoir? So I wrote a memoir. But I gave up. I mean, the memoir, I realized it was never going to be perfect. So after 5 years of editing and rewriting and trying to make sure I didn't exaggerate or put too much emotion of exaggeration, because I hate exaggerated stories that are, the story was strange enough. I felt I didn't need to exaggerate. I wanted people to understand what it was like to be a member of a cult without any extra fanfare. Just, this is the life of a cultist. Welcome to my world, And so that was kind of my goal. And that's how I ended up putting all those psychology bits in the book.
And I think you achieved that so well, I mentioned before we hit the record button, there's something you do in your book that feels so different to other things I've read, and that's the way you go through your story in so much detail. You know, it's we're there with you during these experiences. You know, we're present where when you first go to the first communal home, you know, where you spend your time handing out the Mo letters. When you first move over to the Philippines, to Manila, we're with you on all of those things. And when corruption happens, or when you come across something that you don't necessarily agree with, or you're told to that you're not allowed to favor your own children over the other children, you know, you have these moments of your inner monologue it's there on the paper, and we get to have that insight into what you were thinking at the time that you are told certain things, or that you experience certain things. You know, these aren't things that you say out loud. They're not things you express in your body language. They're not things you even let onto other people in the movement that you're thinking or feeling. And it's so, like, it's fascinating to see you have those moments where you're being one way on the outside and responding one way on the outside, and having these thoughts on the inside where you think to yourself, well, this isn't right, and something's wrong with this, and hang on, shouldn't we stop and think, oh, maybe I should I get my stuff ready, maybe me and my family should leave. And it's so interesting to see you go through those thoughts and feelings throughout the book, and the whole book is just filled with your inner monologue, and your exchanges with yourself when you have these difficult moments, and then to watch you explain away why you shouldn't leave, or why it's okay that these things are happening, or why you shouldn't second guess what the leadership is telling you. And that as well is like, it's like watching the process of indoctrination. You're then applying that to yourself. You've had the methodologies put onto you for so long that nobody else needs to do it after a certain point, because you do it yourself. And that is, I feel like that is such an important tool for anybody that's got family, friends, they know somebody that's been involved in a high demand group, anybody that knows, and anybody themselves that's been through this. I feel like your book is a tool to help people understand how people can talk themselves in and out of things, how people can just accept certain things for what they are. You know, when the leadership comes to you and tells you, you know, through new publications, through phone calls, you know, when they trickle down that information and say, right, this is how things are going to happen now in the children of God, and you all just go, okay. It's not just, it's so important for people to understand how that happens. And I feel like your book gives us that. And that's why it's so important to have it in the field, in the space, and available for people to read. So, yeah, and I know we'll keep referring back to it as we go, but something you mentioned before about heightened paranoia in the group, and how, you know, you had PO boxes so that people didn't know your addresses, and you had to drive to the restaurant to use the phone. It's that is, you're in a constant state of kind of fight or flight. I feel like your entire time in the children of God, you're so unsettled, and you're so ready to just get up and leave whenever. And I wonder if they truly believed that they were about to be persecuted, or if that was also, or maybe it was a bit of both, a tool used to keep you in that state of mind, ready to flee, ready to run, you know, keeping you kind of in that state of paranoia, as well as kind of like the whole organization being in that position of paranoia.
Yeah, well, it's hard to say. I don't know whether Berg did it on purpose, or whether it just was just part of the deal, like what happens. But yeah, it was definitely how it was. And when your mind is filled with, like, okay, first of all, we got to always be watching out for enemies. Second of all, where's our money going to come from? Okay, we gotta have enough money to feed all these kids. Third, we okay, how are we going to get them educated? Okay, how are we going to make sure they eat healthfully? And you've got all these worries constantly. So your mind is running all these programs. There is absolutely nothing left over to stop and lift up your head and say, whoa, wait, whoa, what's going on here? Is this really a good situation? You can't, because you're so caught up with the panicky, the stress of everyday living. There's just not any more room in your brain to do that. I think that's an important thing that I don't know. That seems pretty common in cults, though. I mean, it certainly was my experience in the Children of God, that we were just always had so many things to think about. We just didn't even have time to consider, even to doubt really bizarre things that Berg would write. Like, I think one of the really important Mo letters that he put out came out about 1976. It was called Strange Truths, and it was this dream he had. Berg had, this was a common theme of his letters. He would have a dream and he would interpret it, because dreams were messages from God, of course. And so this dream, he was like, there was this fountain of water. And of course, the fountain comes from the source, the water of the word, it's also spiritual and good parallels there. So the water of the words coming from the source, God. But in that water were strange creatures. And some of the young people were having fun in the water. They were drinking and bathing. But then some young people said, oh, this water's not good because it has creatures in it. But other young people said, oh, no, it's from the source, God, so it must be good. But those young people that thought the creatures were strange, shame on them. They left the fold. So, in other words, he's saying, okay, there's going to be some weird stuff coming out in these letters, but it's all good because it's all from the source, God. So don't doubt anything and be like those bad guys that left. Shame, shame. So that all came out pretty much before the flirty fishing, the sex, witnessing through sex thing came out. So first we had that implanted in our minds. Okay, any doubting is bad. Weird stuff's going to happen, but just accept it.
So he knew that the direction that he was going to take the group in. Do you feel kind of before it happened?
Well, kind of seems like in retrospect.
The paranoia that Berg has perhaps was all his own, and he funneled that throughout the entire organization. Maybe the paranoia was put into place to as explaining a way why you must cut ties off with family and friends and anybody who can find you and anybody who can contact you. Perhaps that was all done to cut you off from those familial ties, to create that insular community so that you don't have that chance to have that space to take a breath, to think critically. You're first of all, you're in another country. At the moment we're talking about your time in the Philippines, but you said, if I had a friend that could reach out to me, or the organization made that so difficult for that to happen, even if there was somebody that wanted to keep in touch with you,
that's exactly true.
They've systematically made that almost impossible. And you're 19 at this age. You lose most of your friends at the age of 19 when you leave school, when you go traveling, or you go into further education. You make a new set of friends who you then end up leaving behind again, or you go off and you start a job and you make new friends in that job. Of course, in typical everyday life, not in this particular situation, but at 19, I have maybe 4 friends from my childhood that I'm still in touch with now at the age of 28. And I think it's, as we go through life, we just kind of like lose people as we go, friends, lose touch with family members. When my grandma passed away a few years back, I'm hardly in touch with her sisters anymore. And we all used to see each other once a year before my grandma passed away. So it's these things happen. So at that age of 19, it's almost even more difficult, on top of you kind of being almost impossible to contact. It's even more difficult at that age to have friends that may be looking for warning signs of you kind of going offline, of you disappearing, of you not being around very much or getting in touch very much. The 18, 19, 20 is such a huge transitional period in people's lives that maybe that's another reason why certain ages were targeted at certain times by by people who were proselytizing for the children of God. And I feel like that's another thing to consider. And then I'm drawing parallels between Berg and David Koresh and Jim Jones and Charles Manson with the paranoia, and people are coming to get us, and we need to be ready to fight because they don't understand us and they are going to come and take away this community that we've built. They don't want us to have what we have, so they're coming to take it away from us, whether it's a race war or Armageddon or, impending doomsday, or the government, with Jim Jones, so somebody is coming to destroy what we've built. So we need to be ready to either flee or fight. And I feel like Berg is kind of putting those same messages out there to people. And then he's saying, okay, so a few strange things are going to start happening, but just accept them because it's what the Lord wants, and it's coming straight from him. And so these Moses letters, these Mo letters, they start to change again in tone, and this is where we see some of those revolutionary rules start to change. Indeed. Extremely. They almost do like a polar shift almost.
That's right.
So just talk us through how that happens. You're still in the Philippines, and then all of a sudden the entire message of the church seems to just shift.
Okay, so Berg wrote these letters about how he and his mistress, well, he had gotten rid of his first wife and had a second wife now named Maria, who is still her name is Karen Zerby, and she's still the leader of the cult now. But they called her Maria, Mama Maria. She and Berg were in London, and they would go to nightclubs, and Maria would dance with different men, and then Berg would tell her what to do, and then he was pimping her out. And so she would go and have sex with men and tell them about Jesus or whatever. And so he pioneered this radical new method of proselytizing. And then he got kicked out of England and he moved to Tenerife. And then he got more women to come live with him there. And then they would go out to the clubs in Tenerife and do the same thing. And then he wrote letters about that, describing how it was done. And now that's going to be our new push. And so that came to my ears at about 1977. So I was about 20. And he framed it as, it was called flirty fishing, like after the Bible verse, follow me and I will make you fishers of men. Oh, what a travesty for Christians to hear that. So Berg, he said that flirty fishing was like having no limit to what we're willing to do to reach a lost soul for Jesus. So that sounds pretty noble. Oh, you'll just do anything to reach a lost soul for Jesus. So I wasn't really happy about that. Not enthused at all. I didn't want to have sex with anybody because I was a virgin, and I'd been kind of afraid of boys. And I was anorexic before, and I was like kind of didn't have much self-confidence. I didn't think I was pretty. I never thought of myself as like a pretty or sexy or like, it just like wasn't my thing. I just wanted to swim. And so, or go hiking or something. Anyway, so here we are. So now I have to go and have sex with a stranger to tell them God loves them. Oh, great. So anyway, I was a loyal, believing member though. So I figured, okay, it is my cross to bear. Okay, Jesus, I'll do anything for you. I just need to sacrifice. And that's what happened.
One thing that struck me as shocking on top of the flirty fishing that kind of just happens, of course, with Berg and his new wife and him kind of pimping her out or furthering the Lord's work, or however it would be phrased, or he is having ideas and revelations probably at this time. So it may be a gradual thing with him, but for you receiving that information as it's being funneled down, it's kind of like okay, well, this is a bit of a shift.
Yes.
All of a sudden, and one of the things he said in his Mo letters, something about being whores for the Lord.
Yes. Let me see. Oh yes, it was a Mo letter called God's Whores. He told us women that we were the only Bible that some men would ever read, and it was our duty to share God's love with them and tell them about Jesus through flirty fishing. That was the message of that. So we were like, it wasn't like a bad thing. It was like a noble thing that we were so willing to sacrifice ourselves like that for the Lord.
And it's not even leaving it up to assumption, he's not even hinting at maybe this is what you might want to go out and do to spread the word. No. He's just put it in black and white on paper.
Oh yes, very clear.
I can't even imagine how that would feel for you to just read that and be, I mean, did you know at that point when you read that Mo letter that would be something that was expected of you? Or were you surprised when somebody said, okay, it's your turn to go out flirty fishing?
No, I knew that it was eventually going to happen. And if I had a doubt, or if ever I had a doubt about anything from a Mo letter or anything like that, what we were taught to do was wrap it up in a bundle of faith and set it aside, which is a cult way of saying compartmentalize and just don't think about it anymore. And so that's what I did. So with this one, I was like, okay, this is not something I would want to do, but I'm a good soldier of the Lord and I'm willing to do anything for Jesus because I love Jesus. And so I guess this is what I have to do. And so what happened is one day I was out passing out Mo letters with some older children, 9, 10, 11-year-olds down in the main park in Manila. And I met this gentleman from the Middle East. And we started talking, and he was a photographer. I guess that was his hobby. And he was taking pictures and we were talking. And then he asked me out to dinner. And I was like, okay. So I went home and I'm like, I can't make a decision like that on my own. Goodness gracious. How dare I? So I went home and said, okay, I met this guy and he wants to take me out to dinner. And they're like, oh, he seems like someone that you could reach with God's love. Yes, I think you should go. And then one of the women said, well, is there anything you need to know about sex? I know you've never had sex before. And I'm like, well, it's okay. I'll figure it out or whatever, And then I went out and we went to see this, we went to dinner in this dancing show of these Filipino dancers. And I'm like, the whole time I'm there, I'm like, I can do it. It can't be harder than dancing. It can't be harder than dancing. I can dance, so I can do this. Okay, I'll just follow. I'm like trying to, talk myself into having the courage to go through with this, So yeah, it was a little traumatic. But anyway, the guy was nice enough. He wasn't like a rapist or brutal or anything. He was a gentlemanly fellow. And so I was thankful for that. And actually, I kept in touch with him until he got married, so a few years later. And after I left the group, actually, I talked with a sociologist. And she had interviewed a bunch of women in the Children of God who had done this flirty fishing. And she said that I was the only person that she ever talked to that called the people that she had sex with friends, because I would never call them fish. Everybody else called them their fish or their kings. And I'm like, yeah, I can't do that. They're friends. They're my friends.
Oh, that's so interesting.
Yeah, it's just like I had to, my psyche just couldn't handle going that far, I just can't have sex with a fish. No, it's like too weird. They're my friends. That's what I had to tell myself in order to be able to do it,
It's almost like that's a small rebellion that you kept for yourself, like a very small rebellion that you kept for yourself, that who could say, oh no, you must call them fish. You're going out, you're fulfilling your duty as far as everybody can see.
Mm-hmm.
You're on board with Berg's plans and his ideas for what it means to further the message. So the fact that you don't adopt that small piece of terminology it's like keeping a tiny little bit of power back for yourself.
Yeah, or else just protecting my brain.
And at this point, you're so cut off from a typical everyday life that there's no access to mainstream news or media. You have no idea what's going on in the rest of the world. Even if people were to start speaking about the children of God and this strange change in rhetoric, there'd be no way for you to know that.
Oh, well, no. We did get some news filtered through the cult publications. But if it was anything at all about cults or critical of the children of God, oh, good Lord, no, we would never know that. Or like in, I guess it was like the 1984, Berg's oldest daughter left the group and wrote a book. She left the group, I think, in the late 70s, and she wrote a book. Deborah Davis wrote a book about the children of God, and we weren't, of course, we weren't allowed to read that. And it was like horrible lies of the enemy. She was like given over to the devil. And did I like stop and think, oh wow, I'm really kind of curious to see what she read? No, of course not. I had a baby to take care of and kids to take care of and laundry to do and meals to cook and where are we going to get our money? I was just way too busy to even think about anything like that. Okay, Berg said his lies. Okay, I don't care. I'm not going to listen to it. Let's just get on with the day here. Okay, kids, do your math.
And you're in this flirty fishing world now. You've gone through with the initial interaction, with
losing my virginity,
losing your virginity. You've had this experience. In some ways, thankfully, it was relatively physically not harmful, which had the potential to be. Right. And I'm sure that there were many people that experienced that, brutality that you mentioned. I'm sure happened to some people.
Yes, I'm sure it did too.
In that situation. So on some levels, it's important to be thankful that didn't happen to you. Of course, you should never have been put in that situation in the first place. So we can't say that we're entirely thankful that your first experience wasn't, all necessarily harmful. But you mentioned in the book that, of course, if we are taking the scriptures and applying them to the children of God, then there is no birth control used within the children of God.
Mm-hmm. That's correct. There was no birth control and no protection whatsoever against STDs or anything.
So talk us through kind of, I feel like that's almost like the next stage of your story is kind of navigating those parts of sexuality.
Well, inevitably some people got STDs, and then oh great, because not after flirty fishing, like it seems like it was just right after flirty fishing came, then Berg wrote another letter that said, okay, now everybody in the communes needs to basically have free sex. So, but he framed it as you need to take care of each other's needs, as if like sex is like this huge need that you're going to die if you never have it, So especially the women have to take care of the men's needs, And so there started to be free sex in the homes. And geez, if effing was bad, that was worse, really, because But so then if some girl goes and gets an STD from some guy that she's FF'd, then she goes home and has sex with some guy in her commune, and then he has sex with some other girl, and then everybody's got gonorrhea, So then we go to I remember going to this gynecologist in Manila and for some VD medicine, STD medicine. And she's like, I'd really like to do a study on your group on the spread of these venereal diseases. Yeah, that would be kind of interesting, wouldn't it? But so we did take medicine, in spite of our basic rule against seeing doctors. We did take medicines for STDs. And yeah, and as for babies, if a woman had a baby, this is like so silly. If a woman had a baby with an outsider, it was called a G, or maybe even with a guy in the group that she wasn't married to. I think they might have used the same word. It was a Jesus baby. It was like a baby given to you by Jesus, a special present, you know. And can you just imagine being a kid and like, oh, mommy, why am I a different color from you and daddy? Oh, because you're a Jesus baby, honey. It's like, what?
It's
So awful.
it's that technique though, isn't it, of having an answer for everything. So if anybody
Yeah.
in the movement comes forward and says why this, why that, it's again having those answers for everything to explain everything away and for you to go, oh yeah, okay. And to stop questioning it, you know. So it's even
Right.
if you have like a bud of skepticism or unsureness and you think, oh, maybe I'll look into that, and somebody gives you an answer immediately, you're like, okay, I don't need to think about that anymore. It was taken up brain power that I need to reserve for, you know, the children and my obligations in the home to cook and clean and everything that you are responsible for. And it's I wonder what Berg's true intentions were behind, you know, behind changing the rules. Was it to, again, like you said, to spread the message of the Lord, to invite new people in who otherwise might not have joined if they, you know, if they thought, is it because if there is open sex, if there's liberal relationships within the movement, you know, people can still get married, but they're still expected to go flirty fishing, they're still expected to kind of please multiple partners, I'm using air quotes that people can't see, is that because it will encourage people to stay, or is it because it will bring a certain person into the group? When you go flirty fishing, are you expected to get people to join the church, or are you expected to get money from them in the way that Berg was pimping out his wife and calling you whores for Jesus? What are the intentions behind this, do you think, at the time?
Well, I can't really speak for Berg's mind, but the initial presentation was that we were sharing God's love and winning souls for Jesus. And like the first man I had sex with, I didn't ask him for money, but he was nice enough to give me a bottle of French perfume. And I was like, oh, what a nice guy, you know. And I was allowed to keep that, which was kind of unusual, and unusual of me that I even kept it. I think I kept it. But sometime later was when he was like, well, he wrote a letter, I think it was even called Make Them Pay. And he's like, look, you're giving them your bodies, you know, they should at least give you a donation to help your missionary work. And so then flirty fishing became the big money spinner for the group. And I'm kind of would think that would be a big motivation. And the free sex within the group, I think that does a lot. Well, it did two things. From my point of view, it caused a lot of relationship problems. And so everybody was just caught up with these relationship problems. Nobody's going to doubt or have problems because they're all just having relationship problems, which was kind of taking up a lot of people's energy. Or it also has been like a thing that I think historically rare communes have done in history, and it's supposed to like bring a greater unity among the group. Now, I don't know if that was his intention, because who can say what his intentions were, but definitely flirty fishing was about the money. And I can't really say why the group free sex was. It's like maybe it was
Well,
just a
I
Berg
think,
thing,
yeah,
because he was having sex with anybody he could get his hands on, including his daughter and granddaughter, and like he was quite a horrible person.
I think from the paranoia that Berg expresses early on during your involvement in the group, it's clear that there are probably some mental health issues at play with Berg, and I'm sure people have looked at him from a psychological standpoint. I'm sure people have diagnosed him themselves. You know, professionals, I'm sure, have used him as somebody to look at and study in terms of his actions. And then, of course, the really nefarious, awful things that went on to happen with him personally, and then that he encouraged to the rest of the children of God, I think speaks further to potential mental health issues, and of just think it's untreated, or it's hard to say because I don't want to self-diagnose, but I don't understand how any healthy person could ever take part in or encourage those things. But another part of your book that is so important, and I really, really wanted to focus on this and make a big point of this. There are so many times where people say things like, how could the parents let that happen? Or how could the other members of the group let that happen? And when we start to see the child abuse come through in your book, and the themes of sex abuse, of physical abuse, religious trauma, spiritual abuse, all of the really difficult subjects that come through after you've spoken about the things that have happened to you, it's so important to remember that you have been systematically indoctrinated into this group. You have had that rewiring of your brain happen. So you are also a victim. So when people say, how could the parents let that happen? It's not as black and white as that. It's not as easy to say, nobody let anything happen. And the things that were happening to the minors, to the young adults, to the children, were things that were happening and had already happened to the adults. So that when the stuff does start to happen with the young people, there's no, like you said, there's no space for the adults to say anything. And where would you go anyway? You don't have any money, you don't have anybody you can contact. If somebody was to say, okay, I'm gonna just take my loved ones and run, how would you do that? Where would you even start? So another thing that your book does that is so important is help people understand how these situations can happen and how these events can take place. And it's important that people understand that. Again, I'm trying to formulate my mind what I'm trying to say, but I don't know if that's coming across to you in a way that you kind of make sense of that.
Well, we're gonna jump ahead then to how far ahead in our story do we want to jump here?
I'm kind of just voicing my thoughts as they go, so it's completely up to you. So without jumping ahead, I guess the next thing to talk about is that you do fall pregnant with your first baby.
Yes.
And what's that like for you? I mean, there's no pregnancy tests. There's no.
For heaven's sake, no.
How does that all happen?
Okay, well, fortunately, I was moved. I had the opportunity to move away from a regular mainstream Children of God commune. And I moved into what was called World Services, which were more like a higher echelon of Children of God members, where people like worked on publishing Mo letters and creating other publications and administrative sort of work. So I moved to Hong Kong to do that sort of work. I was taking care of children, to take care of the children of a couple who did that. And Hong Kong is kind of expensive. The rent was really high. In fact, there used to be a radio show that on a radio show, a local show there, they would have every month they would have a contest of which rent went up the highest, because they used to just go up every month. But anyway, so it was so expensive there. So I told the couple, like, hey, why don't we just move to Manila? It's so much cheaper there. And so he's like, okay. So the couple and I moved to Manila, just the three of us. And so we're living in this little house, and it's like, whoa, how pleasant, I'm just with this couple. These are really chill people. And and the husband's really got a great sense of humor, and his kids are super well behaved, and they're so easy to take care of. And I just, teach them every day and do the cleaning and cooking, and it's like so easy. And I'm um, quite obsessive in my scheduling, and so I have everything down to like a 30-second brackets or whatever, so I know what I'm going to do. So I have like a large measure of control, and I think this kind of reflects my feeling of being out of control for many years. So when I had a chance to control, I was like, I really had it down. But the kids seemed happy, and we were pretty happy all together there. I thought we were anyway. And then I kind of started falling in love with the husband of this couple. I felt kind of as in love with the mother too. Like I was just like really liked these guys a lot. And then because Berg said we had to take care of each other's needs, here's the air quotes, needs, this man would come every 2 months or so and have sex with me. And in one of those times, I mean, I don't think he even liked me, but he just did it because it was his duty. So I was like a charity case. Oh, that makes you feel good, right? Um, and so one of those times I got pregnant, and I actually didn't really think about being pregnant, but then I was out flirty fishing with this man that I had seen before, and came from America, and I was with him the next morning. Like I spent the night with him at his hotel, and then in the morning I was like, "Oh man, like he smoked or something. His tobacco smelled so bad." And he was like, "You're pregnant," and I'm like, "No, I'm not." And he's like, "Yeah, I think you're pregnant." I guess he had a wife and kids, so he kind of knew. And sure enough, I was. And so I think I went to get a checkup, found out I was pregnant, and then I guess we were like months passed, and then the husband got called away to go to Europe to work with Berg or something, and then I went with this guy that used to help women have their babies, this family member that knew about childbirth. He came with me, and and he helped me have my baby at this hospital in Manila, and that was my first childbirth.
So
And
you
then
were actually you were able to have your first baby in a place that had medical care equipment.
yes, it was a good thing because I needed an hour's worth of stitches. Um, but yeah, but see, so I had the initial checkup, and then I think I went to the hospital for birth, and that was pretty much what I did with all 8 of my pregnancies. You have your first checkup, then you go and have the baby. Like most, like I don't know how it is in the West, but in Asian countries where I've lived, mothers go like every 1 month, every 2 weeks, every week, every couple days, and they get a lot of medical care in their
Yeah,
child. But not with me, not with me. And then uh, I generally that day at that hospital, I think I stayed 2 days. Told the baby, they said the baby could leave straight away, but I couldn't because they were afraid I was going to hemorrhage or something. So I had to stay for 2 days in that hospital. The next one, I think I went home the very same day I had the baby. And that was pretty much, it was a rare that I could stay in the hospital for a few days after I had a baby. Oh, actually, I didn't go to hospitals always. So I went to midwives sometimes.
there was one case in the book where you were able to actually have a couple of days rest, and I felt so relieved for you when you were able to get some sleep. Oh my goodness, I almost was like taking a breath of relief because
Yeah.
so I've had 2 babies, so I was thinking, when you were expected to, some really difficult moments where you were, pretty much literally just post, childbirth, and you have a baby to nurse, a newborn baby to nurse, and there are responsibilities and requirements for you in the communal home, people that need things from you, and so it's like you and I was kind of like, I wanted to go and get my little girl, 6 months old, so I kind of wanted to go and get her and be like, no, she can stay with me, because it's those first few weeks of attachment are so important, and they exist for a reason, and it's so difficult for you not to be like, okay, my baby's just going to stay with me the whole time, and for bonding reasons and oxytocin levels and nursing and all of those, reasons that for you and the baby exists for a reason. So when you had those times of basically having the baby and then being thrown back into this busy, hectic, stressful existence, I was like, no, give her some time. So when you did get that little bit of time, I was kind of like, oh, how refreshing. But of course,
Yes.
you should have been able to have that time each time.
Yeah, the thing is that I never, I would have been selfish if I had said, or I thought to my own brain, I would have been selfish if I had said, hey, can I have a day to rest here? You know, I just had a baby. I wouldn't dare. I had to perish the thought of ever asking for something for myself. That was something that like maybe my husband might have thought of, or somebody that was in leadership might have thought, hey, maybe she should have a rest, you know. But no, I dare not ask something like that of from myself, because that would have been selfish. You see, I was raised as a Catholic, right? And I was taught to be a good little girl, to do what I was told, and to always put other people before myself. And so that was such an easy slip into the children of God. That when you're just supposed to live for others. Christians are supposed to live for others. When I was a child, I read books of missionary lives. You know, they all just went to Africa. You know, this is just great. You know, in retrospect, to save the darkened heathen of the world. You know, it's like so silly, but to me it was like so noble at the time as a child. And so that's what I wanted to do. And so you couldn't give a thought for yourself. You had to only think of others. Jesus, then others, then you, is how you spell joy, we were taught. You know, you could never think of yourself. So that was my like, to think of myself after I left the group. It really took a while to actually, like, what do I even want? Do I have a want? Is there a want in my vocabulary? What do I want? I don't know what I want, because I'd never thought about it. It was super hard to even get a grasp of it. It was so foreign to me.
And it wasn't
tangent.
Soon after you have your first child, well, there is actually an incident in the book where you are pregnant with your second child, but that pregnancy doesn't go to full term.
Oh, right. Yes.
And I thought that you kind of brushed over that. And it felt again like one of those situations where maybe in a typical environment, a person may be given a chance to grieve, to come to terms with that situation. And it's almost like in your mind, you're like, okay, that's happened. So now we go back to what we were doing. And it felt again like another one of those moments where you weren't able to take time for yourself to really feel the event that took place.
Oh, yes. I just remember thinking, gosh, I was so sick at that pregnancy, and I didn't even know who the father was. And that was not a good situation. I didn't like that. And so it was like almost a relief that I lost the baby. It's like, oh, whew, I don't have to deal with that. Not knowing who the father is, you know, it's like just so strange, you know, didn't like it.
Eventually you go on to get married to somebody in the Children of God. So you have an official marriage ceremony. And what does that look like?
Well, we had already been together. Like, okay, so I met this, okay, I have to back up a bit. So after I had my first child, and I was really in love with this man that was the dad, and I'm thinking, oh, maybe I can just be his second wife, because lots of people had two wives in the family, in the cult, you know. And so then when the baby's 6 months old, the guy comes back from Europe, and I'm kind of wondering what's going on. And then that was the time when my dad was dying, so I had to wait for him to come back from Europe before I could go to see my dad. See, my dad, my stepmother called me, or maybe it was my brother. They called me like when the baby was a month old, and they said, your dad's really sick. Can you come home and see him? But I had promised my baby's father that I would stay and take care of his wife and children. So we were just two women, you know, in this house in Manila. Well, granted, there were other Children of God members in other places that probably could have stepped in, but I had given my promise, my word that I would take care of this woman. So I just kept like putting off my brother. Oh, the baby's too small. I can't travel or blah, blah. And finally, I think I told my brother the truth one time. I think I said, I just can't leave until this guy, the father comes back. And I don't know when he's coming back and I can't get in touch with him. So finally, when he came back, then I got, my stepmother sent me tickets and I got on the plane to fly back to see my dad before he died. And I landed in San Francisco and my sister met me at the airport and we're chatting and eating dinner. And she showed me pictures of my dad. And then she said, well, Dad didn't make it. He died yesterday. And they hadn't told me, because they didn't want me to cancel my trip. So I went home and went to my dad's funeral, met my stepmother. And that was pretty sad. But then I went back to Manila to be with this couple again. And then about a year later, they moved away to go work with Berg, Moses, and I got moved into this commune with lots of people that were still practicing free sex. And I was like, oh man, what a lack of control. I went from having complete control in my little world to zero control. And it was very traumatic. And plus I was like traumatized because the people that I loved, the children that I loved were gone. My family had just been torn away from me. I felt these people I'd been with for over 4 years. And there I was in this like whirlwind commune with all these people and having sex and, people having sex right in front of my eyes. And like, oh, it's like, please get a room, but it was really traumatic. And so
there was no room for these people to get a room either, by the sounds of things.
Exactly. That's right. So we shared a room with this very ardent couple. But then when New Year's came around, I was like, oh, my poor son, he really needs a father. So I prayed for God to supply my son with a father, not for anything for myself. God forbid I should pray for a husband for me. But I did just pray for a father for my son. And so then not long thereafter, I met this man that seemed so gentle and kind and sweet. And everybody told me he was the most wonderful man ever. And I'm like, why isn't he married already then? Because everybody else was married, and very rare to meet a single man. So, whoa, well, maybe God saved him for me. Ooh. So within 6 weeks, we were together. And then maybe a year and a half later, a couple years later, oh no, a few years later, we actually had our wedding. And I'm like, already after 2 months of being together, it was as if my husband never wanted to touch me again. Like he would push me away if I tried to hug him. And I was like, wow, am I that ugly? I was a really insecure teenager, right? Anorexic. And also it's like, oh, it must just be because I'm so ugly and undesirable. It's all my fault. And so he's always pushing me away. And so it's like, but I promised I would stay true to him till death do we part, So leaving him would never happen.
And he's also obligated to go and be with other women in the commune?
Well, we were in that, by the time I was together with him, we were back in the same house where I'd lived with the gentle couple, the quiet couple, with the leaders of the country. And it was just me and them and my husband. And sometimes there was another person helping with the kids there. But it was just mainly us and them. So just two couples.
Right.
And so, no, he wasn't having to go and have sex with anybody at that time, nor was I. We were kind of protected. Although I did do some FFing because I had a regular man that I was with. And so I would see him like a lot.
And is there a point where you go and move out of that environment and then he is expected to go with other women?
Oh, yes. So yes, nothing lasts long in the children of God. So yes, that little quiet house didn't last for long. We moved to another relatively quiet house, but in that next house, there were a lot more women. There were single women that my husband had to go and quote unquote take care of every week. So he was scheduled. So there was this sharing schedule. They call it sharing is the euphemism for sex. So a sex schedule, and it was on the refrigerator, right? There's a dishwashing schedule, the cooking schedule, and the sex schedule. So I every time I walked into that kitchen, I would avert my eyes because I just couldn't bear to see it. All the times he was scheduled to go have sex with these other women, because he never wanted to touch me. And so I just thought, oh, I'm just so undesirable. But he'll just go and like when he has to have sex with some other girl, he'll just go and have sex with them. Like, well, why? Why will he do that with them and not with me? What is wrong with me? Why doesn't he love me? And so like my insecurities were like out of proportion, huge. And I was very unhappy. And then it continued like that. We left that house to another one, and it just continued on until finally I was just like, I'm just so sick of this jealousy and my insecurities. I just can't stand it anymore. I think I'll just give up. And so I kind of like just gave in and just gave up. And I think that's what the leaders would have called yielding myself to the Lord, when you just give in.
It was very similar to something I read in Nicola Ranson's book, A Slice of Orange, where she talked about following Bhagwan Sri Rajneesh, and she spoke about having somebody that she loved so much. And because they practiced free love within Rajneesh Puram, and people would come up to her and say, you know, or in the ashram in India, they would come up to her and say, wow, your husband's really good in bed. And she'd be like, oh my goodness, well, I know that because he's my husband, but he was out having relations with other people. And we had a lengthy discussion around whether we thought monogamy was natural or whether it was a condition of Western upbringing, society, because there are some communities in the world that do have polyamorous setups within their communities, and these have been traditions and practices that have been passed down for hundreds of years, you know, in other parts of the world that are perhaps less accessible to us than what we are used to in the Western world. So we had a big discussion around whether I thought, or whether she thought, that was her intrinsically finding it difficult to share her husband, or whether it was a condition of her upbringing in different parts of the world, or whether it was natural for her to feel jealous in general of her husband being with multiple partners. And I don't know if you have any thoughts or feelings around what your jealousy may have said about you or your upbringing or monogamy and polyamory as a subject.
I guess I didn't really think about that before, but yeah. Well, I was brought up really, you know, puritanically, and so I would be all for monogamy. But since I've been in Asia, like historically, China, Japan, these people for generations, the men have had mistresses. It's just like a normal thing. Nobody's going to raise their eyebrows about it. And you know, the men had sex with young boys is like just super commonly. It was not a strange thing at all. And so the ideas of in Asia about towards sex were pretty loose, you know, pretty liberal compared to us with our Judeo-Christian backgrounds. You know, it wasn't until the Westerners came in that the ideas towards sex changed. So I don't know. That's a hard call. You know, look at India. I don't really know. You know, I think it's all a cultural thing.
It would be really interesting to ask somebody from one of these communities from hundreds of years ago whether they were jealous of their, you know, or even if they had significant others, you know, or partners or one-on-one marriage ceremonies. It'd be interesting to ask, though, if those levels of jealousy still existed in, or if they exist in the communities where polyamory is.
Well, I was reading a book called Wild Swans. It's written by I can't remember her name, but it's there. Wild Swans. It's about 3 generations of women in China, and so the grandmother was of the generation that had bound feet. So that's how far back we're going. And so she was married off to a warlord when she was young, but she was one of his many wives. She was just a concubine. So it was like, it was a given that the guy's going to have lots of women. And then like I read a lot of books. I read another book. I read Historical China. When the men were just, it was having more than one woman was just the normal. The women just accepted it because that was just what it was, and men like to do that, so that's what they do. I'm not really sure how possessive they felt, and that sense of jealousy that we Western women might feel over our man who we want to be our man. I'm not so sure they felt like that. Plus, a lot of their marriages were arranged, or they were sold off to be wives. So I think the whole construct was different.
Everything that you've just said there makes me feel so tense and almost angry. And the fact that we just say, yeah, so women were just kind of like sold off or arranged marriages. She was just given to a warlord. And we just say it like that because that's what it was like. It was just
that's
happened.
What it was like.
Oh my goodness.
Were longings of men. That's just the way it was. It's like history.
Stop.
We've come a long way. We've come a long way.
Oh, we haven't come far enough though at the same time. So at some point you and your husband and your children move into a house with many people.
Mm-hmm.
And this it feels like a time that starts like spiraling almost. This is where it feels like things become really chaotic for you. There's so much responsibility, there's so many children, there's so much going on, there's no space for anybody to live there. Talk us through what that experience was like when you first moved into that home.
Now in Manila, right? Okay, well, I didn't really have any choice. It was like, okay, now there's this new the combo vision, some Mo letter came out. So we all have to live together in these enormous homes. So somebody rented this enormous house. And I don't even know how many people were there. There were lots of couples, and lots of couples came from World Services, which would mean the wives came with their children and the husbands stayed because that, the husbands had important work for the Lord to do there. And they generally got new, younger wives from the second generation. And so the wives, the mothers and their children came with maybe some guy sent to, quote unquote, take care of them. So these families were broken up. All these kids were there and they all needed school. But no, they have to. School is not something we do now. We teach them how to witness, and we teach them to sing and dance so they can go and busk on the streets or go sing in old folks' homes or whatever. So a lot of their time was spent singing practice, and then we had to go office to office or door to door selling cassette tapes and posters to get money. And so we'd from morning to night we'd be doing that. And it was so awful to me because I always wanted the kids they have school time, and of course we couldn't send them to public school because, that's the territory of the devil or whatever. You had to teach them yourselves, but then we weren't allowed to teach them ourselves, but we still had to teach them, but we weren't allowed to because we needed to go out and raise money. Oh, and meanwhile, then there was sharing schedules were still happening, and we had to go out at flirty fishing sometimes, because we needed to get money that way too. I mean, you have a lot of people together and it costs money to live, So it was pretty awful. Yes, that was pretty awful. And then from that place we moved. Oh, and then, well, the most awful thing of that was that everybody got measles. And measles is not an easy sickness. Especially the variety that we had in the Philippines, some tropical measles, it was bad. Well, the younger children were all in this kind of downstairs room that had, it was a mansion we lived at. We had to rent a mansion because where else would we have enough bedrooms and space? It was still crowded. But this giant downstairs room is where they put lots and lots of bunk beds. And so my husband stayed there for 2 months inside that room with these sick children, taking care of them. And then the teenagers that had it were in a upstairs room with another gentleman that took care of them. And Oh my goodness. The younger children, they just kind of slept and, drank their juice or whatever. They were, and the curtains were kept shut. The shears were shut so it wouldn't be too bright because their eyes were photophobic. Measles is like that. But so these younger children, they were just kind of sleeping and taking it easy with it. And they weren't so bad off, it didn't look like. But the teenagers, oh my gosh, I don't think I've ever seen such sick people in my life. They had measles inside and out, and just like they were just miserable. Oh, it was so sad.
What medical intervention could have happened if,
Oh,
I don't know how measles work. I don't know if there was some type of medication that could have been accessed to help overcome the outbreak.
well, I think they put like calamine lotion or something on their bumps, but I don't really know honestly if there is a medication for measles. But I mean, there's a vaccine for measles. That's the way to solve the measles problem, is just get vaccinated. But anyway, the kids went through it. And thankfully, nobody died, and nobody needed to go to the hospital for any transfusions or anything. So everybody pulled through. But boy, those kids were sick for about 2 weeks, I think. And then we made sure that they took it easy and recovered, because we didn't want them to get sick again. Take it easy, kids. So we kept a good watch on them for another month to make sure that they didn't get another sickness, and made sure they had decent food. But of course, can you imagine the financial chaos that threw us into, with all these people having to take care of these sick kids? And anyway, so that was pretty horrific. And then after that, we moved like, like, I don't know, every 6
all the
months or so
time.
we were moving.
All
Yeah, we
the
moved a
time.
lot. I just can't even keep all the places, keep track of all the places I lived. But we moved into this big mansion in Manila. I mean, bigger than that. This one had 35 toilets. I'll never forget that. And it was this huge house, and we lived there for just a little while, until the woman kids I was taking care of, her name was printed on the front of the newspaper as one of the leaders of the Children of God, and the National Bureau of Investigation was investigating the Children of God there. And so Berg said she needs to leave the country right away. Her husband was gone. She was sick, pregnant, and she had 5 kids. And so my husband and I had been taking care of her kids for like 5 years already. And so we went with her to Tokyo. And that is how I moved to Japan to help this woman move to Tokyo, who it was natural that I would help her. I've been taking care of her kids for 5 years. Who else is going to go with her? So, yeah.
And at
That's how
this point, has the word from Berg about free love filtered through, where it's kind of, he's given permission for people to start having sexual relations with children? Has that happened at this point?
Oh, well, let's see. You're like, why don't you? Well, isn't that like going to be on the top of your mind, Mary? Well, I was just so busy.
No,
taking
but
care of
again, I think that's why your book is so important, because it really is an insight into why that isn't at the top of your mind. It really, I can't explain it in the way that I want to, but that's why people just have to go and read it to understand. Yeah, definitely.
Okay, well, by the FFing kind of, because 1987 or 1986, around then, AIDS started. And so then Berg said, okay, no more FFing. Only people that you have been FFing all along, like only long-term friends, long-term fish, can still be FF'd, or flirty fished. The rest you can't go out with strangers anymore because it's too dangerous. You might get AIDS and die, right? And spread it to everybody. So that was the end of that. And the interhome sex kind of, you couldn't have sex with people that weren't in your own commune anymore. He made all these rules, and because of the AIDS thing, I think. I think. I mean, I could be wrong on why he did that. I can't really remember. And then, oh, somewhere around in the early 80s, there was a home, a big commune in Greece called Music with Meaning. And this place was like Berg's ideal commune or practice commune where he had like I guess he closely oversaw them, and they started to film adult women dancing with these shawls, like little scarves that are see-through, and then the little girls dancing with them. And at the time I just thought, oh, their little girls are copying their moms, how cute. I didn't think of it as grooming at all. I just thought, oh, little girls are dancing, fine, you know it's how naive. But so from that, oh yeah, the Davidito book came out too. And in the Davidito book, that's a book that um, Berg's a woman that lived with Berg, who took care of Berg and his wife's baby, Davidito. There was like how to take care of a kid childcare book. And it was like, it showed pictures of her having quote unquote love up time with him, and he'd be naked on the bed and she'd talk about like masturbating him and stuff. And frankly, that just kind of went over my head. And I was like, yeah, okay, fine. That's not going to happen. It's like, who would do that? Nobody I know would do that. But that's what was happening in the book. But why didn't I go like, what? That's horrible. Why is she doing that to him? She shouldn't be doing that. That thought didn't go in my head. Why not? I don't know. But it didn't. I just thought, well, I'm not going to do that. I'm just going to, okay, what does she say? She talked about in that book how you should teach the children like from the Mo letter. So what you do is her teaching plan was thus: you take a Mo letter and you read it to the children, and then maybe you give them some fill in the blanks for their language arts, and then maybe you try to figure out how to make a math lesson out of this Mo letter. And I'm like, yeah, no. If I'm going to do that at all, I'd rather use the Bible verses or something. But yeah, I just think it's such a stupid way to teach children. Anyway, even at the time, I thought that. So I was more focused on teaching the children than masturbating a little kid, which I was never going to do. So I didn't like condemn her because she was like above me. She's like the holy prophet, she's in the holy prophet's house. So whatever. But I'm in my house and I want to make sure my kids learn to read and this and that. And that's my job. So like, I guess I had compartmentalized it again, just had to disconnect from it. And so I didn't see people having sex with kids, but clearly it happened, which is when I read those things after I read the internet forums from these second generation people after I left, and I heard these stories. And of course I was just horrified. And I was like, oh my God, why didn't I see it? Why didn't I know that was going to happen? Like, I thought, oh, the people in the children of God are good people. They're all good people. Nobody would abuse a child. Like just like I thought about that leader.
Yeah, and
bad person,
even then, when that Archbishop, is it?
Yeah.
When even then, when you have those thoughts about him, he's still fired. So then you're like, of course they've got rid of him. They don't want bad people. They know he's a bad person. So all of these things happen in your journey that confirm your thoughts of that you had all along. He's a bad person. Oh, he's fired. Yay, they saw him for what he was. I knew this place was a good place. Yeah, so it's hard because even when you have those difficult thoughts, there are events that happen that stop you from exploring what those thoughts might mean. And you never saw any of this happening around you. So why would you ever think that it was happening anywhere else?
Yeah.
And that's, again, why the book is so important for people who want to understand how and why it happened with the adults' knowledge or without the adults' knowledge in these different children of God homes. at some point you arrive in Japan, and what are your first impressions of Tokyo? What is that like in terms of changing from the Philippines and everything that you've known for the last few years?
Okay, well, in the Philippines, Filipinos are smiling, friendly, happy, wore colorful clothing, love to dance and sing. So I get off the plane and walk into Tokyo, and there's bustling men in black suits bustling everywhere. There are black and white cars. I'm instantly illiterate. I can read nothing at all. I can understand nothing at all. There's nothing familiar about it. Everybody's somber, rushing here and there, busy, busy, busy. And there is not one happy, smiling face, not one colorful vehicle, not one bit of colored clothing. It was just all very bland and conservative. And then the men would be walking seriously along the street, and their wives would be behind them carrying the baggage, until the wives would rush forward to open the doors for the men so the men could go through. And I'm like, whoa, what's going on with this country? Like, how rude the men are, I think. Well, they didn't know. There are different cultures in this world, but boy, it was a shock. And what the hardest thing was the language. I just couldn't understand anything, and I hated not being able to read. It was just such a frustration.
It's funny because you're actually talking to me from Japan now, so it must have made some kind of impression on you at some point.
Isn't it ironic? I never would have imagined that I'd live in Japan for most of my life. Here I am.
So when you arrive and you have this kind of change, this shock in culture and your ability to navigate your way around, and again taken away even more possibility of you regaining some level of independence, even further taking that away.
That's true.
Where do you go to live at that point?
Okay, well, first we went to live in this enormous countryside house owned by a queen. This are air quotes here for the queen. She's a woman that was friends with the children of God, I guess. I don't know how deep that friendship went, but she had this land that a big building that she had been using to take care of disadvantaged or troubled teenagers, I guess. But all the troubled teenagers left, and the children of God moved in, and that's where I went and stayed there for 2 months, and then we moved to a house in Tokyo, and it was an old house with this kind of sandpapery stuff on the walls that catches all the dust. And I had an allergic reaction to it, and I was pregnant. And so I was kind of sick from that house and the dust and the whole situation. And it was really, really hot. I had lived in Manila for a long time, but the summer in Tokyo was so hot and humid. And my poor little girl was just covered in heat rash. And I was like, we didn't have any money, and we were eating like donated food that was out of date food that like these store owners would donate. Donate is really not the right word, but people like a Japanese person and a foreigner, you would go around to these stores, little mom and pop shops, and oh, if you have any leftover food at the end of the day, can you donate it to us? We're missionaries, blah, blah. And people would give them food. Well, I imagine they'd give them the outdated food, because you have to pay to throw away stuff in Japan. So it was like easy out for them. So they'd give us this outdated food, and that's what we'd live off of. And I was pregnant and sick, and the kids had to go out postering, and like they'd say like one line in Japanese, and God help us if somebody asks us a question because we can't understand anything. All we can say is, can you give us a donation and thank you. It was awful. And then we needed to go to Manila to renew our visas, and we didn't have any money. But yeah, so that was kind of hard. And then at that point in time, I remember thinking, this is such an awful situation. Oh, and at that time, my husband beat my son with a wire hanger, and I was just horrified. And I like, what could a 5-year-old boy have done to deserve that? Nothing. That's like, but he was such a sweet and gentle man. My mind would tell myself, and I would be like, but there was no escape. Like, we had no money. I had no family. I had no friends. I could not speak Japanese. What was I going to do? So then I had to tell myself, okay, well, you're not being burned at the stake. Okay, things could be worse. Well, or at least you're still alive. At least you're healthy. At least, things will get better. Things will get better. Oh, but that was a pretty low point. And then we moved into this enormous house. Well, not actually, I wish it was enormous. It was an apartment, and we put, wow, maybe 70 children in there. And some adults, and we took was this plan that some leader had, that the 3 homes in Tokyo would work together. So there'd be one home that did witnessing, and one home that did what we called provisioning, which means asking businesses for food and items that we needed, like they would get the stuff we needed, and this other home would witness to people. And then ours was the home where we would teach the children. It was a school home. So that was like a new plan that came out. So I was in the school home, and they just kept bringing in more and more kids. And I was like, wow, aren't we filled up already? And then we moved into the basement of the building, and where one of the leaders set up these plywood between these donated hotel chairs, that just, so the chairs would be back to back and the plywood would be between them. And that was how the rooms, that's how places were separated, like into rooms in this like shantytown basement. And there was windows along the side, and so people from the apartment building could go down and look in the big sliding windows, like on the side. The whole side was windows, right? So people could go down this staircase and look and see this shantytown with all these weird foreigners in their basement. It was like insanity. And I was pregnant, and wasn't I always? And I lived down in that little basement there by myself. I think my husband was taking care of a group of toddlers with 2 other women, and he would sleep with the toddlers in their room to take care of the children, because their mothers were in the home where all the witnessers were, also where the provisioners were. So we had all these children. We even had a 2-month-old baby there without her mother. It was like, oh God, no. I was like, why? This poor baby. And then, as if things couldn't have been any worse, we got whooping cough. Everybody had whooping cough. And at the time, that was right after my baby was born. So I had been moved to an apartment upstairs, where I was like a secretary to this leader, and taking care of my newborn and helping this guy, well, doing the work for that guy while he went out and went to a gym or something. I don't know. He was never around. And then while I was out one day, I was expressing my milk for this 2-month-old baby that was sick, because like this poor baby, they were giving her, bottled milk that she was just throwing up all the time. And so I was expressing my breast milk for her and putting it in a baby bottle in the fridge. And then one time I was out, I don't know where I was. Maybe I went to a doctor appointment, maybe, I don't remember. But I came back and somebody had fed my own baby with that baby bottle from the sick baby. So my daughter got exposed to whooping cough from the sick baby's bottle. So, okay, well, so I moved back downstairs because she was already exposed. And then, oh man, I just could not believe how bad it was when I walked in. It was like like some sort of house of horrors, There was just kids coughing everywhere. There was a woman in the dining room that, like, you walk in and there's this big room that's kind of like the living room, dining room. We had tables set up because we had so many people. So it was like all dining room. This woman was like, had this child across her lap, and there was a basin, and she was patting the child's back so the kid could throw up all this mucus and vomit into this basin. And she was like patting him and trying to take care of him. And these kids were in these bunk beds, three level high bunk beds, and they were all sick and with buckets to vomit into. And it was pretty horrible. Yeah, but yeah, it was pretty bad. But thankfully it passed. No one died. I think the 2-month-old baby did end up going to the hospital for a little while. Why didn't her mother go there and take care of her? This is a question we won't know the answer to. But I found out last year. I talked to somebody that knew that girl and she told me that she is a healthy, happy adult woman now. So I'm happy to hear that. She survived. So I was really worried about her. And but she had a very kind woman that took care of her, a German woman, just slept with her in her arms like every night, just held her always. She was such a nice German woman. She had just joined the cult in India and moved over, and then she was given this baby to take care of, and she was so diligent with the baby. I'm very kind to her.
That makes me so sad, because that's all that babies need, isn't it? They just need that. They just want that comfort. And it makes me sad to think that she was so small and she didn't have that.
Oh, she had that German lady taking care of her. So that German lady did not put her down. She held her the whole time. Yeah. Well, I mean, there were nice people in the cult, people that were very dedicated and that worked really, really hard, you know. They were just in a bad situation, you know. But we tried really hard to make things fun for all the kids, and you know, it was hard.
Yeah. And it comes through in the book as well that the education of the children is so, so important to you. And that is one of the only times that you butt heads with people in leadership, is when they are, you know, they're telling you that the education needs to go on the back foot because other things need to happen. You know, like what I would maybe call the child labor is the priority over the education of the children. Or they would say, you know, that they don't like the way that you're educating the children because you're not using the Mo letters, you're using the Bible. And that was the only time that you would say, you know, no, I disagree, I think this is the way it should be done. Or eventually that would be the thing that would be the catalyst for you, you know, distancing yourself and moving yourself away from the group, you know, was your love for educating the children, which is the one of the threads of the book that kind of, I think, keeps you from losing your mind completely. You know, there are times where you say that you reflect now and realize that you were having like a breakdown of some sort. You know, occasionally there are points where you kind of realize that you've just shut down completely. But it's always the teaching of the kids that brings you back, and the children. So, you know, in some ways, those children had you as well as that baby having that German lady. I feel like if you weren't fighting for those children to have some type of education, then it may have just been, and maybe even was in other places, just disregarded altogether. And you spoke in the book of one point where you are like shamed publicly in front of the home that you live in for something that you did. And I just wondered if you could talk everybody kind of through that particular event, which is another common tactic used within these high control groups that we discuss.
Okay, well, this happened after. Okay, I was in the hospital or clinic at this time, actually, with my fifth baby, fifth baby was born, and I stayed for like 4 days, I think, that time, maybe 5. I think it was 5 days. Oh no, it was only 4. Anyway, yeah, 4 days. And so I was really, you know, happy. I had this really sweet little baby boy, and I was going to go home and introduce him to his brothers and sisters, and how nice, you know, new babies, oxytocin, you know, it's lovey, happy. And so
I love those parts in the book where you say, I just stared into my newborn's face, because isn't that one of the most incredible moments in life?
Yes.
is having that first, like, yeah. And so I felt those moments when you had
that's
them.
sweet. And so anyway, but then somebody said, is this district shepherd woman has written you a letter. Okay, that's not going to be good. does not bode well for me. And this were the days, I believe, before your time, but when you had a computer printout that was like this one long sheet of paper that you'd run through, and there'd be little holes on the side that read through the runners, so it's like this super long sheet of paper. So I had this, when I got home, I was in my room, where which was like this walled off piece section, like this homemade wall kind of divider between my room and where the children that I took care of slept. These young like 11, 12 year olds that I took care of. So we kind of shared the room, but we had a little wall there. Anyway, so I was in this room, and I was like, my kids were going to come in and meet their new little brother, and then somebody hands me this big 8-page computer printout, and it's this long correction for, like, I don't remember. I remember she said I was aloof, and I was self-righteous, and I favored my children because those were like always what I always got corrected for. And lots of other things I did wrong in great detail, all my sins and crimes against the cult or whatever, and on and on. And so and then I was supposed to read some Mo letters as my, to reform myself, or was it my penance? Who knows? And then I was supposed to have united prayer and do a big confession, ask for prayer and have people pray for me. So the day that, it was my birthday too. The day that should have been a big joyful day with me bringing my baby home and my birthday. I forgot it was my birthday. Lovely. Then I get this huge correction, and I'm just under this terrible cloud, and I couldn't sleep at night, feeling like such a complete failure. And I'd failed the Lord, even though I tried my hardest to be a good disciple and to serve the Lord and to not think of myself and think of others, and tried my very best, but it wasn't good enough because look at what a failure I am. And so then when the time came, there was this evening meeting called with all the adults, like, I don't know, 50 people or so. There were a lot of people there, maybe 40, 50 people. I can't remember. And then they all put their hands on me and prayed for me and spoke in tongues. And first I had to do a confession what all my sins were, but I can't remember what they were. And then they all prayed for me, and then people gave prophecies, which means they say whatever comes in their head, assuming it's God speaking to them, And then, that was that. And then I was supposed to read all these Mo letters for my study to keep reforming myself. But from that moment on, I think that one like kind of eviscerated any last vestiges of myself or any self-confidence I might have had. Any strength I might have had was pretty much gone after that one. I felt like I was just a shell, just kind of going through the motions of, I was just a shell after that. And just like, it really stuck out to me when we moved to the next commune, and I met a boy that I had known in Tokyo. And he was like a really nice kid, super nice kid, still friends with the guy today. And he saw me, and he's like, "Oh, hi, Mary." And I'm like, "Oh, yeah, hi, how's it going?" And then he says to his friend that he's with, this teenager, maybe 14 years old, he says, "Oh, watch out for Mary. She means what she says." And I'm like, "Yeah, not this Mary." Not, maybe I did before, but yeah, I don't think I do anymore. I'm not the same person anymore, because I just wasn't. I was just broken after that.
Maybe they could sense that you were starting to push back against some things and realize that you needed some kind of radicalizing to kind of get you back into that submissive mindset.
I tell you, they got me back into that submissive mindset, that's for sure.
And in 1975, the leadership of the Children of God changes hands?
1995.
Oh, is that 95? Sorry, I've made a mistake there.
It's just a typo.
So in 1995, the leadership of the Children of God changes hands.
Mm-hmm.
And does that change the church significantly, or does it kind of continue as it was?
I think it changed it significantly, um, because what they publicized a book called they published a book called the Love Charter, which was new rules for what it meant to be a member. And until that point, people had to live in these enormous communes with like 4 or 5 couples at least, which with everybody having 8 and 10 children, this is a lot of kids. Um, and then at that point, with the Love Charter, people could just live in 2 family homes. And I think, well, that was the biggest change from, in my opinion, was that people could live in smaller homes. So at that point, we at that point, another significant thing happened in our lives is that I was some visitors came to our house for like a little party that we had, like a little event we did with the neighbors. And this one man was talking, and I was in with this talking to the men, like the neighbor men, while the women were out cleaning. I don't know how I managed to get in the room with all the men, but there I was sitting on the floor, and they were all, of course, speaking Japanese. And I'm like keep nudging this foreigner beside me. Hey, what are they saying? Can you translate for me? What are they saying? And I kept asking that, which must have been really annoying. But one of the old visitors said, well, how can you call yourself a missionary when you can't even speak Japanese? And I'm like, yeah, I've been thinking that same thing myself. So like, yes, confirmation. How can I call myself a missionary when I can't speak Japanese? If it's exactly right. So my husband felt the same way. And so we decided we were going to move away from other cult members and live on our own so we could experience the culture of Japan and learn the language. And we both hated um, selling these posters and tapes and videos and CDs. I think we had by then. We hated doing that. Hi, here, can you take this? Can you give us a donation? It's basically begging on the streets. It was like so humiliating. Um, I didn't like that. So he didn't either. So we decided, okay, we're going to move far away from everybody, and he's going to get a job. Okay, so we decided that. So I write to Zerby, Berg's wife, who's now the leader of the cult since Berg died, and I say, hey, and I think she had heard of me through the leader. I had taken care of the kids that were 6 years. She probably knew I existed. So I wrote to her and said, can we have permission to live only with our own family? And not have to live with another couple. And she said, okay, for like a year or two, you can have this waiver. Okay, cool. So we moved to this far away city thinking that, yay, this is going to be great. We are going to be able to experience Japan. It's going to be wonderful. And we just robbed our kids of any socialization they ever would have had because my kids couldn't speak Japanese either. So here we are in this place where no one speaks English, there's no other foreigners, and our poor kids, I'm trying to homeschool them. And it's like, what? Who are they going to play with? Well, they can play with each other, but this is not the best situation. So then we're like, oh, we have to send them to school so they can learn Japanese and have some friends. And then the schools were so regimented, and my mind was still like an American. And I'm like, oh, I can't bear it. They're so harsh. Like my daughter would be outside in these little PE. Do you call it PE in England?
Yeah, PE, yeah.
PE clothes with like little underwear and a little T-shirt, and it's snowing, and the teachers are wrapped up in scarves and coats and everything, and the little girls are out there shivering, and their legs are purple, but that's the way they tough up. This was a cultural shift for me that I wasn't ready for, and I'm like, yeah, I can't handle it. My mother's heart is breaking. I got to take my kids home so I can teach them myself. So I took them out of school again, and then it was just kind of a mess. And then meanwhile, our marriage situation was just getting worse, and my husband was just being more harsh on our kids, and because he was feeling pressure from his job, and he'd just come home and be angry and beat the children and for any little thing that tipped him off. And it was just getting really, really rough. And then we were thinking, oh, we have to live with other people. So we'd be inviting people down to live with us. And it was really hard to live with other people. And so that was another stress, trying to follow all the rules and trying to make sure we passed out our literature. And nobody liked doing it. Not certainly not my husband. I didn't like it either, but I felt it was our duty. We didn't want to be in eternal shame and for failing God. So that was kind of what happened when we moved away. But my eyes slowly became opened as Zerby, the new woman in charge of the cult, Berg's wife, Zerby, her name is, she started putting out these new publications that were so bizarre. The first one was, you have to pretend you're having sex with Jesus when you have sex, or you're masturbating. It's like, but this is not a required belief. You can believe it if we believe it, but you can choose it. You choose to believe it if you want to. You don't have to. We're like, great. We're not going to believe that one. Okay. Then she comes out with this one. There's these spirit helpers for every situation you can imagine, and they battle against these demons for every situation you can imagine. So it's like, I don't know where she came up with these ideas, but okay, the closest I could think of that was the Catholic saints. But then what's with all the demons? And then, well, wait, these angels fighting against these devils. And by the way, if you can memorize all their names and call on them specifically, you have more power. Oh, but then there was another one. Because we were such special people, the children of God, the called out ones, the elite army, end time army of the Lord, we were given a special privilege called the keys of the kingdom. Now, I don't know if you know your Bible verses, but Jesus said, I will give unto thee the keys of the kingdom. And whatsoever thou shalt bind on earth shall be bound in heaven. And whatsoever thou shalt loose on earth shall be loosed in heaven. So the keys of the kingdom apparently were some powerful, mighty force. So Zerby told us, no, don't pray like Christians of old, and we used to, in the children of God, pray in Jesus' name. I ask this in Jesus' name. That's how you end your prayer. She'd say, don't say in Jesus' name, say in the keys. We pray in the keys or something like that, in the name of the keys or something, in the keys of the kingdom. Anyway, it was really crazy. So all these crazy doctrines were coming. But to me, I think the icing on the cake came when they started publishing these novels that were apparently channeled, through their channels from authors of the past, like Robert Louis Stevenson or something, and then dictated through one of their channels in Zerby's home, this beautiful novel that he didn't have time to write on earth, and they were just horrible. I was one of the few people in the group, I think, there must have been others, but I had a big trunk of English books that I brought with me everywhere I went. And I'd have a lending library so kids could read books, right? And so I had books in my house, and my kids, I would let them read books, I did get corrected for that once, but it was when they read Harry Potter, and somebody thought that was really bad. But I mean, good Lord, how could I let them read Harry Potter? Anyway,
it's always Harry Potter as well. It's always it doesn't matter which religious movement you're looking at, it's always Harry Potter.
Yeah, J.K. Rowling. Anyway, so with these novels, they were so bad. God, if that's the best that heaven can do, this is something's wrong. So, and then Zerby, after they lost the court, or I guess they won the court case, but that big court case in England caused a lot of press, and the internet was up. And so people that had left the group, some people had put photos of Zerby up online. And so I think she tried to counteract that by making a video of herself talking. So so she had this video that she had recorded, and it was sent out to only a few places. So it could be really valuable, if it's only a few places, you only a few copies, it's scarcity makes it more valuable. So we had to drive far away to go to another commune to watch this milestone video. And oh, it was so eye-opening, man. Zerby had this long, straight, hippie age gray hair. And she's way older than me. She's got to be she must have been in her 60s or something. I don't know, but way too old to be dressed like this. Oh, in my conservative opinion. She was wearing a dress that was cut down past her breasts, and a big necklace down between her breasts, and all these big, long, hippie earrings. And she was rocking back and forth the whole time she talked. And she was just her monologue just went on and on about how the enemies are going to attack us, and we need to fortify the borders of our camps and set up our tents really strong against the enemy. And I was like, this woman is crazy. So my son had already left. My oldest son had already left the group, and he was living in Tokyo working. And so I write to him and said, wow, we saw these videos of Zerby. She looks crazy. She's a crazy person. He says, yes, mom. Yes, mom. She is a crazy person. You're right. Read this. And then he sent me a link to the Lord Justice Ward's statement. And I'm like, oh my God. And then I got onto the Moving On website, which was with a forum that used to be around for young people, but it's gone now. But it was a good place for young people to tell all their horror stories. And so I was reading them, and I'm like, okay, I'm out of this. We're out of this. This is the end of us and the children of God now. But then my husband was like, but I haven't read it yet. And we can just send in our report one more time and send in our tithe. It won't hurt anything, will it? And what did I say? No way, man. We're not giving another cent to that cult. No, I said, all right, honey, we can do that. Like a good submissive Bible woman.
But it started to spell the end of your time in the Children of God. These are all...
As soon as he read that, we were out. That was it. I think it was a mistake making those videos. I don't know if I was the only one that thought she was crazy, but she looked pretty crazy.
The statement that you mentioned as well had a profound effect on the Children of God movement altogether.
The book? Is that what you mean?
The court case?
Oh, well, I don't think anybody in the group read it. I don't think unless they went online and read it themselves. And if anybody read it, I don't see how it could not have an effect on them. But it had already been out, but I hadn't even heard of it or read it. All I knew about that court case was what I'd learned, probably about 10 years before this time when I left, was when there was a court case, and it's a big attack of the enemies, and it's persecution, and our enemies are lying about us and how great we are. It was framed like that, like it was persecution against us, not like a legit court case where someone was concerned about a child's welfare.
I feel like it might have been the first time that the events taking place within the movement were put in a public space, though, for people to be able to know what is actually happening within some of these communal buildings around the world.
Oh, you mean the judgment of the Lord Justice Ward? That statement?
Yeah, just like the first time for people to be kind of people like me, just kind of, going about life outside of a movement like this, to be like, wow, that's what the Children of God are doing. Kind of a first insight into, us seeing what's happening, what's been happening.
Yeah, it was pretty shocking for me to read that, because it wasn't like, it just wasn't my experience, right? So I didn't see it like that, right? Because I was inside the group. But when it was looking at the group from an outside perspective for the first time in my life. And that's what did it. It was like, what? And then, of course, as I said already, the guilt came. Like, how could I have wasted my life like this and put my children through this?
And so how do you and your husband then take that journey finally out of the group, and what does life look like for you, kind of transitioning into some kind of typical everyday life?
It was the hardest time of my life. The cold wasn't a picnic, but we had our fun times and our bad times in the cold. There were fun times. It wasn't all bad, but at this, I was like, I was feeling full of guilt, really bad. I'd wasted my life. I had not raised my children in a good way. I'm a mother, and of course I want the best for my children, right? And I come to find out I did it all wrong. Really felt bad. And so I was like, well, how can we get our kids into college? Here we are in the boonies of Japan. Like, how are we going to get our kids into college in the States? But so then I was contacted by one of the kids who I had taken care of before, and she was living in in America. And she said, I have a 7-bedroom house and I've got plenty of room. Can you come live with me? And the schools in this state will, if your kids go through high school here and they do well, then the state provides for their college for free. Just come on, move, and I have plenty of room. It's fine. It's fine. And so I was like, well, I dare not ask my brothers if I can live with them. How dare I? Like, I can't do that. I can't ask somebody, right? I was in no position to think I could do that, and not the mental space to like, hey, come on, family, you're my family. I need some help. I couldn't do that. Like, it never would have occurred to me. I don't know. I think it would have been imposing. It just would have been selfish, It wasn't where my head was at. So anyway, this girl's all like enthusiastic. I should come live with her. So, okay. So I and two of my teenagers, high school age, moved over there and left my husband running. We had an English school at that time. I left him running the school and with the younger children, which was very, very hard to do, to leave my younger children. Ooh, super hard. But anyway, I felt that's what I had to do to get those kids into high school. So, and I had written to the principal of the high school before I left. I exchanged emails with him and said, okay, so I've homeschooled these kids and we're moving over from Japan. And the reason we're moving is to go to your high school. So can my kids go to your high school? Oh, yeah, sure. Come on over. So we went on over, and my son was first year, so he got in. My daughter was supposed to go into her senior year. Now, my daughter was very studious. She's very, very smart and self-studies. Like she doesn't need to be, she's self-motivated. So like, she does great. She would have been fine. But they said, oh no, she's been homeschooled. She not in a, like, I wasn't like a registered, like what do you call it? Like a registered, accredited homeschooling system. Okay. I had just schooled her myself. And so they're like, oh, she has to go downtown to this really dangerous section of town and take pass-fail tests on every single subject she ever did in high school. Huh. And then if she passes them all, even if she passes them all, she won't be eligible for the scholarships to college because you have to have good grades. You can't just have pass-fails. And I'm like, but why didn't you tell me this before I moved away from Japan? I'm thinking that in my head, but of course I'm not going to say that to an authority figure. So I'm like, today, if it were me, I would go to that principal and I'd say, hey, you said my kids could go to this school now. Let's see it. Mm-hmm. Okay, we came across the world, all the way across the world to do this. And you're saying no now? What are you talking about? I would have fought. But in that time, I was like, oh, okay, I guess she'll have to go to community college then. It was just a complete disaster. That time in America was a complete disaster. Everything went wrong. Well, the one son had a great time going to school. Another son came over and went to school, and his was pretty much okay. But this daughter, she couldn't get into. She got into the community college, but it was so boring because the level was so low and the teaching was so slow, and she couldn't get her driver's license because she didn't have a learner's permit for a year because she wasn't 18 yet. Like there was just all these loopholes, and like catch-22s that nothing worked. And I was living off my savings. And when I went to cash the last of my money to change my yen into dollars, my last bit of savings, I just went to a parking lot and I just cried. I was just in utter despair. What am I going to do? How am I going to get these kids into school? It's not working here. I couldn't get a job because I had no credit history. I had no contacts. I had no college education. I had nothing. I was like a nobody. And people looked down on me for being poor. I felt so much like stigma. It was mind blowing to me. And I just couldn't even, like if I had gotten a minimum wage job, I might have been able to do that, but that wouldn't have paid the rent. So what? So anyway, so I went through all my savings, and meanwhile, my husband was back in Japan, and he had, I don't know, I can't say it was his fault, but we had 2/3 of our students quit. So from our school. So he wasn't making enough money to survive. I wasn't making enough money to survive. So I'm like, okay, I'm coming back to Japan. So after 10 months in the US, which was utter failure, like the lowest part of my life, I sold anything I had and moved back to Japan. And then we just were in panic mode to get money again because we weren't making enough to live. And so then that's when my husband moved away to another city to get a job. And I've been on my own ever since. So, but that's what happened 15 years ago.
But now you're in Japan now.
I'm still in Japan.
You've written a book.
I am. I've written a book. I have recovered.
You're sitting in a beautiful room with indoor plants and a bookshelf full of books. And I've seen your sons walking around. There's a Christmas tree, and we're talking, on a computer with webcams and the internet and everything. So yeah, look, you've got like a setup around you and a place for you. So how, from that absolute rock bottom where it feels like there's absolutely no way out of it, no way to recover. Now we need to know how you have managed to get to where you are for anybody else that may be in that rock bottom place and looking for some inspiration on getting to where you are now, even though I'm sure every day is still a recovery and every day is still probably feelings of guilt towards your children, towards the situation that you're involved in, guilt towards yourself, grief for lost parents and family members and relationships and your childhood and the things that you missed out on and all of those things that come with trauma and rebuilding and changing your course. For anybody listening that needs that advice, what would you tell them?
Well, I mean, I would advise the therapy, but that wasn't an option for me. So just study. You got to rewire your brain from all those years I had in the cult of reading cult publications every day. I had to change my brain from that and put new information in there and get new thought patterns, new intuitions. All my reactions were wrong. I had learned wrong reactions. I had to relearn how to react to things. And it takes a lot of effort, but it's so worth it. But reading and learning is really the key. And what not to do is to deny, is to say, oh, everything was fine. Oh, God looks at my heart. And so God knows that I was trying my best and all things work together for good to those that love God, right? The Bible says that. Well, that may be true and all, but you've got to, the unexamined life is not worth living. So it's really worth it to look at your life and where you are and assess learn from your mistakes. Our past is for education. It's not really for food for remorse. It's just to learn from. So I wanted to learn what I could from those years. And so that's what I spent my years just studying, to try to understand myself and understand why I made those decisions and to be able to come to a peace with myself about it and kind of forgive my younger self and understand that my younger self was just human like everybody else. And everybody makes mistakes, like the Dalai Lama says, when you're in a situation and it's hard, well, just expand it and know that like you're just one of the human race and everybody has these same feelings and these same inadequacies and these same weaknesses. It's not just me. There are other people. Anyway, the Dalai Lama has some quite good words of wisdom. He's a smart man. As a neurologist too, very smart. And well, reading is really the key. And study.
Read and study what you can, educate yourself, forgive yourself, and understand that everybody has these thoughts, feelings, regrets, and access therapy if you can, if it's available to you, if it's something that is, within your financial capabilities, if it's something that is accessible to you in the part of the world that you live in.
Mm-hmm.
And I guess that you've probably found some catharsis in writing about your experience in your memoir. Would you
Mm-hmm.
recommend sort of having a creative outlet for people in terms of, maybe talking on a podcast or writing a book, or you've got a blog as well? And so is there anything that you would say around talking about your experiences?
Well, I suppose that would kind of go in with therapy, huh? Talking about people's experiences. I think it
Absolutely.
would be good if people could have therapists and someone to talk to that's a professional listener
Yep.
who can guide and help. That would really be good. But because I didn't have that, I turned to study and writing myself. I know that when I was first out, and I think there's like almost stages of grief you go through after you leave. Like my faith in the children of God, my faith was enmeshed in my psyche. So this was kind of torn apart out of me. And it's like something I kind of have to grieve for. So at first I was really guilty, feeling guilty, and then I was really angry, and so I had no one to tell my anger to. So I got a notebook and I just started writing all my anger in this notebook to get it all out, all the things I was angry about, all the ways I'd felt used and taken advantage of, and just on, just to get it all out. And then, okay, then I could move on to the next stage. But yeah, that was really helpful to get all that anger out. But now I can look back on it, and I have a bit of understanding. Um, and once I finished that, I finished my book and I kind of forgave myself. And okay, I know my younger self was just this naive girl that got mixed up in this terrible group. I was still a mother. I tried to do my best, but yeah, it wasn't the greatest. But okay, everybody's seems to be doing okay in their adulthood. So, you know. And then I changed my focus, and I started studying other things, and completely different. Uh, and so I think changing my focus was also important, because if you can, like, if you study one thing for a long time and you change your focus, it completely renews your brain. Like, it makes it like your brain all alive again in different ways. Because so I changing my focus of study was, I think, also really good, and plus it helped me to move on. So I'm not like always dwelling on the cult life thing, because there's more to me than my past. I've got a future. That there's so many things I want to do in this world before I die. I mean, you know, I've already outlived my mom, my dad, my brother, and my sister. So I mean, my life, I realize my own immortality. I may not live that much longer, judging by my immediate family. So there's things I want to do. I want to write another book. I want to, like, there's other things I really, really want to do. So I don't really have time to dwell on the past anymore. I just have to move forward to the things I want to accomplish.
I think that is profound advice for people who are maybe looking at what they do next, making plans and realizing that the experience that they've had doesn't define their life. It's part of their life. It will make up part of who they are now. It will influence, decisions that they make in the future and decisions they've made in the past. But it doesn't have to be everything you are. And we often say that on the show, when people who have disabilities don't want to be defined by that disability. It's almost the same that you experiencing cult-like tactics and being involved in high demand groups doesn't mean that that's all that you are. Just that experience doesn't define you entirely. And your book, Abnormal Normal, is an example of part of your life, but you're not your entire life. It's not an autobiography of your existence from birth up until now. It's a part of your life. It's a very big part of your life, and probably, as I just said before, influences decisions that you make and decisions that you'll go on to make, but it's not everything that you are, and you're making plans outside of that, and you're learning things outside of that, and you've turned your attention to things other than that experience. And I think that's so great for anybody that is stuck wondering what they do next, where they go next, where they put their energy, and to redirect that focus is so great. And I really feel so lucky to have been given the opportunity to read your book and take away from
you're so
it.
kind.
Well, it like I said, I feel like it's an educational tool, and it's very important in the space of understanding cults and cult-like activity, but also in understanding the very systematic ways in which somebody is molded into somebody else's shape. And I feel like it's so prevalent, and I really want to highlight that to people in the hopes that they will go out and read it, to learn more, to educate themselves, and to also understand why some things happened the way that they did in the movement itself, which still exists today. It's just been renamed the Family International, so it's still ongoing today. Whether the same things are still happening within the movement, it's hard to say. But just to kind of finish our chat today, could you let everybody know where they can find your book, which was published in March 2020? So it is available for people to go out and read today. We will be featuring it as the memoir on the monthly memoir giveaway for the month of February. But where can people find you, Mary? Where can they find your blog and some of your other online writings, and specifically your book?
Okay, well, the book is on Amazon, Abnormal, My Life and the Children of God. And it's available as a Kindle book and a paperback. And I write, my blog is not so active now, but I wrote on actively for 6 years. It's called Coming to Grips with My 30 Years in a Cult. And that's, you just Google that and you'll find it. Or I write on medium.com now, Mary Mahoney. So my most recent stuff is on medium.com.
So I will link all three of those things in the episode description for anybody that wants to go on and read any of Mary's work. I really do highly recommend it. Obviously, if you want to read a memoir for entertainment purposes, people love to read people's stories, understand people's stories. But also, if you want to read something cult related for an educational standpoint, again, I think that this book serves both of those purposes. So for anybody looking for their next book, this one is just highly recommended. And thank you so much, Mary, for giving me the opportunity to read the book and for sitting and talking with me for 4 hours. It must be late where you are now, so I do appreciate that as well. And just keep us up to date with anything you go on to do. You're hoping to write a second book. Keep in touch with us and let us know what you decide and any plans you put into place.
Well, thank you. It was a pleasure talking to you.
Thank you so much for your time, Mary. Enjoy the rest of your evening.
Thank you so much.
Thanks. Bye.
Bye-bye.
That is the end of this week's episode. If you'd like to get in touch, you can find me at cultvaultpodcast@gmail.com or follow me on Twitter and Instagram @cultvaultpod. I am your speaker, Casey, and this has been The Cult Vault.